The US House of Representatives passed a $7.8 billion emergency spending bill. That's to fund the government's response to the virus outbreak. In the US, so far, there have been 11 deaths.
And the IMF is taking similar measures. Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva says the organisation is making available $50 billion, including $10 billion at zero interest for the poorest nations.
This would allow countries to tap into financial resources immediately on emergency grounds. Countries can draw on this money if they need it right away for poor countries with zero interest rate.
Georgieva said the global economic outlook has shifted to more dire scenarios as the coronavirus has spread undetected, but she added that it's still difficult to predict the impacts.
And after the Fed cut interest rates to boost the economy, Bloomberg spoke to the St. Louis Fed President, James Bullard. Now, he said markets are wrong to assume the central bank will cut rates again at the policy meeting in 2 weeks' time, because, he said, it's unlikely officials will know much more by then about how the coronavirus is affecting the outlook.
I don't think you should prejudge that meeting at this point. We just had a meeting. We moved the policy rate where we thought it should be, given the information we have today. Obviously, it's a very fluid situation, and we are keeping track of things.
And Bullard himself, of course, doesn't vote on monetary policy this year.
And the Dallas Fed chief, Robert Kaplan, will join Bloomberg Radio and Television later this evening. That's at 11:30 p.m. London time. We'll bring you highlights of that interview tomorrow morning. It will be really interesting to see how the market reacts if we don't get a Fed cut at the meeting, Roger. Of course, the equity market didn't react well to the emergency 50 basis point cut, but the bond markets show the market once more, certainly in fixed income.
Now, meanwhile, in the UK, the incoming Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, says he's waiting for, quote, more evidence of virus impact, but policy can always act in a timely manner.
I think it is quite reasonable to expect that we are going to have to provide, collectively going to have to provide some form of supply chain finance in the not very distant future now to ensure that the effects of this shock from the virus are not damaging.
And this morning we heard Goldman Sachs sees the Bank of England lowering its key rate to 0.25% in March. Also that the virus, they say, will push the UK economy, quotes, to the edge of recession.
And finally, OPEC Plus is again stuck on the issue of output cuts. Russia wants to maintain the current level, but Saudi Arabia is looking for curbs as big as 1.5 million barrels per day. That's to offset the huge hit to demand from the coronavirus outbreak. OPEC's full ministerial meeting takes place in Vienna today.
Right, let's get the latest now in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. And Leanne, you start with a rather crucial summit in Moscow.
Yes, indeed, Roger. Good morning. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Turkish counterpart Erdogan will try to patch up their partnership at the latest Syria summit in Moscow. That's happening later today. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer reports.
After the deadliest fighting yet between Turkey and Russia-backed Syrian forces, there's no guarantee of a breakthrough as the two presidents try to reconcile competing goals in Syria's northwest Idlib province that are ratcheting up tensions. In Moscow, Henry Mayer, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
There are growing concerns big events like the Tokyo Olympics could be postponed to contain coronavirus. Despite this, the IOC president, Thomas Bach, is reaffirming his commitment to the success of the upcoming 2020 Summer Games happening in Tokyo.
I can tell you that today in the meeting of the executive board, neither the word cancellation nor the word postponement was even mentioned.
Speculation that the Games could be delayed due to the virus were fueled by comments from the Japanese Olympics minister. Now, more on the virus. The Virgin Atlantic Airways CEO will take a temporary 20% pay cut to help ease the financial toll caused by the coronavirus. Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet has more on that.
He's also asking his employees to make similar sacrifices. The long-haul airline said annual raises due this month will be deferred until August, when they will be reassessed. Weiss will receive the lower salary for 4 months through July, while some other top managers will find their paychecks 15% lighter. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And in the US, allies of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are discussing joining forces if Warren exits a campaign. That's according to the Washington Post. It comes after a poor showing on Super Tuesday for the Massachusetts senator. Yesterday, Michael Bloomberg pulled out of the race, endorsing former Vice President Joe Biden. A reminder, Bloomberg is the founder majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're seeing equities in Europe move higher after an emergency US spending bill adds to global support to battle the coronavirus. We saw the S&P 500 jump more than 4% yesterday, but US futures on the back foot. S&P minis now down more than 1% as the 10-year Treasury yield also continues its slide. 101 handle down 4 basis points. We'll discuss the market impact next. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
The IMF is making available $50 billion to help countries deal with the coronavirus. For more on the economic and market fallout from the epidemic, I want to get to David Kotak, Chairman and Chief Investment Officer of Cumberland Advisors, who joins us now from Sarasota, Florida. So, David, every day is a different story. Obviously, we're getting more deaths, more bad news from around the world. We've got the Biden surprise upset here in the United States. We've got the rate cut. Where is this leading you on strategy?
Well, we have focused on this high volatility, Emily, 1,000 up, 1,000 down, 1,000 up, 1,000 down. It's extraordinary volatility. We're going to see more of it, we believe. We are sector conscious, so we don't have any exposure in transportation. You just had a discussion on airlines. We are worried about hospitality, cruise ships, and we're worried about some aspects in the credit markets. We're starting to see spreads widen, so we have to be careful about that. We are overweight the U.S. healthcare sector. The U.S. healthcare sector should be owned in the face of the market volatility because it has such a positive outlook for the sector.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. Asian equities traded higher today, playing catch-up with the big rally on Wall Street yesterday. The Nikkei 225 closed higher by 1.1%, while the Kospi closed up by 1.25%. The Shanghai Composite's up by 2%, with the CSI 300 higher by 2.25%. For U.S. stock futures, the E-mini S&P and E-mini NASDAQ futures have unwound some of the sharp gains seen yesterday, both trading lower by about 1%. European equities are edging higher in early trade this morning, with the Eurostoxx 50, the DAX, and the CAC 40 all up by 3 to 4/10%, with the FTSE 100 trading up by 1/10%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is 4 basis points lower at 1.02%, with the 10-year German bond yield 2 basis points higher at minus 0.62%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is little changed, with most G10 pairs trading in tight ranges. It's a relatively light calendar in terms of European economic data today, with January production data for Sweden to be released, in addition to UK new car registrations for February. In terms of central bank speakers, we get the Bank of England's Carney and Haldane on the calendar today. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Roger?
Thanks very much, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, thank you. The likelihood of recent extreme bushfires in Australia being repeated has risen by 30%, according to a new study. Its latest report says climate change is adding to the risk by compounding associated factors, such as severe drought. This season's fires raised an area the size of England, killed dozens of people, destroyed thousands of homes, and devastated wildlife. In Hong Kong, the pet dog of a coronavirus patient has been confirmed to be infected with a low level of the virus. This marks what's likely to be the first known instance of human-to-animal transmission. The pet Pomeranian has not shown any symptoms of the disease and will remain in quarantine and be returned to its owner once it is infection-free. And even James Bond can't beat COVID-19. The next film, featuring everyone's favourite super spy, due for release next month, will be pushed back until November as Hollywood scrambles to cope with the outbreak. MGM distributor Universal and the producers made the decision after careful consideration and thorough evaluation of the global theatrical marketplace. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, governments and central banks are following the Fed in a bid to stem the economic impact of the coronavirus. We've seen a cut from the Bank of Canada. Also yesterday, the US House of Representatives passed a $7.8 billion emergency spending bill to fund the response to the outbreak. At the same time, the IMF is making available $50 billion, including $10 billion at zero interest for the poorest nations. Over in Europe, Italy's announcing more measures to contain the virus. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg Markets macro strategist Laura Cooper. Laura, great to have you with us. My reading of what the US equity market did yesterday, rallying 4% when it fell on the Fed rate cut, is that equity markets look like they're going to respond better to fiscal measures, or at least a combination of fiscal and rate cuts rather than rate cuts alone. Is that the right interpretation, and will it continue to fuel equity markets?
Yes, and I think that is the correct way of looking at markets now, because the strong surge that we saw yesterday did come off the back of these U.S. spending measures. And I think this reflects the fact that the effectiveness of monetary policy in the current context of a health scare is relatively limited. So we do need this kind of fiscal injection. Now, whether or not it can be sustained, certainly from a market's perspective, they're relatively near focused in terms of expectations from central banks to further stimulate. But ultimately, when we look at the U.S., the ripple effects of the virus in terms of supply disruptions and in terms of consumer sentiment have yet to be impacted. And so the risks of a U.S. recession are certainly rising. So it's likely to be the case that we're going to see significant, more on the fiscal front, really, to contain pressures going forward.
And yet the market seems to be also baking in the idea that there will be further Fed cuts. I mean, within 3 weeks. I mean, is there a risk here that the expectation, if it isn't fulfilled, and we heard from Bullard and St. Louis, it might not be, that in itself could be a downside?
Well, absolutely. And even though we saw the 50 basis point shock and awe from the Fed earlier, markets are still continuing to expect quite a significant degree of easing going forward, closer to the zero lower bound by the end of this year. And I think the comments yesterday yesterday from Bullard are quite telling, because even though he's a non-voting member of the FOMC, he is cautioning that it's premature to begin to bake in these types of easing policies going forward. So certainly I think markets are not yet focused on that. They're still expecting cuts from the BOE, from the ECB next week. And even though policymakers, they're likely to follow through on those near-term expectations, certainly this full-blown easing cycle, it looks premature.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the 2s-10s curve in the US steepening for 9 days kind of speaks to those expectation of Fed rate cuts. I mean, there's interesting dynamics in the markets today. US futures are lower now, which kind of speaks to what you said about equities maybe just really trading near-term sentiment. The 10-year yield is down 4 basis points. We're seeing yields edge up on the Bund and on the gilt. Is that just because we're bouncing back a bit after hitting that record low in the 10-year gilt yesterday? There are some out there saying the 10-year Bund yield is going to get to a fresh record low even without ECB cuts.
Well, I think what we're seeing now is certainly, I mean, in the U.S., so in Europe today, we're seeing a bit of a catch-up from the strong moves that we saw yesterday in the bond market near the close of the day. I mean, we saw the 5s and 30s curve steepen quite significantly. So I think we are seeing some catch-up there. Certainly, I think going forward, even if we don't see the actual ECB coming through, the recessionary risks in Europe are rising. And so I think we're going to continue to see this haven flow into bonds, and that's going to continue to drive yields lower.
And briefly, Laura, what's happening in China? We have seen Asia as being the place where it's all being pushed forward. China stocks closed 2-year high, even despite China being at the epicenter of the virus. I mean, do we need to see more action in China? They're talking about getting everyone back to work. Is the sentiment going to change in Asia, is what I'm saying?
Well, I think the reason why we're seeing Chinese equities outperform is because it's largely driven by sentiment. It's driven by this massive injection of liquidity coming from the central bank, less so than elsewhere where it's driven more by domestic factors. So I certainly think that going forward, Chinese equities will continue to outperform on the back of that, but certainly it's unlikely to kind of keep reaching higher levels, but just outperform on a relative basis.
Yeah, and China is certainly one place that very early on was talking about the whole suite of measures, both monetary and fiscal. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura Cooper, Bloomberg Markets macro strategist. And coming up, we'll be talking more about OPEC, Roger.
Well, we are. We're going to delve into the meeting that's going on in Vienna. Not, it seems, an extraordinary meeting or an emergency meeting, a regular meeting up to a point, but one where there's huge divisions between Russia and Saudi in particular.
Yeah, we were seeing really quite big gains in oil overnight in Asia. We've come off the highs a little bit. So WTI up just 0.2%, 46.85. Brent at 51.26. European equities also coming off the highs, but still in the green, up 0.2%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street is making quick work of undoing the damage done in last week's huge losses. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is coming off its second gain of more than 1,000 points in 3 days. So far this week, it's up more than 6.5%. It fell nearly 12.5% last week. Investors are cheering efforts by the world's central banks to work together in an effort to minimize economic damage from the coronavirus. Google is the latest company to shift job interviews online to stop the virus from spreading. It will conduct all interviews on its Hangouts online platform for the foreseeable future. Facebook has made a similar announcement, and Amazon has put on-site job interviews on indefinite hold. Twitter is testing a way for users to post photos and videos that disappear after 24 hours to encourage people to share more often on its service. Twitter calls them fleets, short for fleeting tweets. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Why do so many Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies count on GEP? Because GEP helps them optimize their procurement and supply chain operations, helping reduce expenses, boost EBITDA, and increase competitiveness. The results are nothing short of amazing. Strategy, software, managed services. GEP brings it all together. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Incredible. This piece is my favourite. Stunning. I can't look away. Who's the artist? It's clearly a Costa. Oh, look, there's the artist now. What do you call this masterpiece?
We call it our velvety smooth flat white.
Crafted with the world's best beans and finished with a floret hand-drawn by expert baristas, the flat white at Costa Coffee really is a work of art. Visit the nation's favourite coffee shop and enjoy one today. The question, what is your favourite branded coffee shop, was asked. See costa.co.uk for full details.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
It was a Sunday morning when I jumped on the tube.
And decided to pop down to Greenwich via
a large indoor jungle. And when I got there, I was captivated by a sparkling
scary dinosaur just standing there right in front of me.
So off we went to Wembley Park
to look at the colourful fish.
Tap into the wonderful world of Off-Peak London. Travel in zones 2 to 6 for £1.50. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. £1.50 is an adult off-peak pay-as-you-go fare for a journey not going via Zone 1 on Tube, DLR and most London Overground services. Always touch in and out with the same card or device to pay the right fare.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres, ends 18th of March.
The Big B&Q 20% off bathroom event is now on, with huge savings on a range of toilets, basins, baths and furniture, so you can get a great deal on the style that suits you. But hurry, 20% off ends Monday. You can do it when you B&Q it. Offer ends 9th of March, subject to availability, see DIY.com.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Daybreak Europe live from London.
30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. We started quite firmly in the green. We're coming off the highs, though, a little bit for European equities, up 0.1% on the Stock 600. Looking across regional equity benchmarks, some of these now turning into the red. FTSE 100 down 0.6%. The CAC 40 and DAX are unchanged. The IBEX lower by 0.5%. The FTSE MIB in the red by 0.4%. European equities following the pattern of what the US is doing. Yesterday we saw a rally of 4% on the S&P 500. The market reacting much more positively to the Congress spending bill to the tune of almost $8 billion than it did to Fed rate cuts. It suggests that equity markets perhaps like the idea of fiscal or a combination better than monetary policy. But US futures in the red now, more firmly in the red than earlier. Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all down by more than 1%. We saw green on the screen in Asia. That might have been a bit of a catch up to the Asian session. The 10-year Treasury yield is down 4 basis points, 101 handle on that. And looking across the curve, you're seeing yields fall across the Treasury curve. 2-year yields down 5 basis points, 65 handle, 30-year yield at 165 down 5 basis points. The 2s-10s curve has been steepening for 9 days, though. That's about bets on more rate cuts from the Fed. And speaking on bets around rate cuts, well, the market is pricing for the ECB and the Bank of England to cut an emergency cut from the Bank of England. The 10-year gilt yield hit a record low yesterday. We're up 1.5 basis points now on a 38 handle. The 10-year Bund yield edges up 1 basis point to negative 63. Some say really not long until we get to a fresh record low on that 10-year Bund yield. Taking a look across FX, the yen is the best performing currency out of G10. So that is bid, safe haven bid. The pound up 0.2%. 0.5%. Bit of underperformance in CAD. We did get that rate cut from the Bank of Canada too. Looking at commodities, oil coming off the highs from the Asian session, but still slightly in the green. WTI 46.96, Brent at 51.39, and gold up 0.25 percentage point, $1,641 an ounce.
Now, an update on the outbreak in China. Over 3,000 people have died from the coronavirus and around 52,000 have recovered or been released from hospital. Globally, the number of confirmed cases is nearing 95,000. In South Korea, cases have dropped 3 days in a row with over 5,500 cases. It's the biggest outbreak outside China. In Europe, meanwhile, Italy is closing schools until the 15th of March as the number of deaths jumps by 28. And in the US, California has declared a state of emergency after its outbreak worsened.
The declaration of an emergency in California came after the U.S. House of Representatives passed a nearly $8 billion spending package to fund measures to combat the outbreak. The Senate is expected to vote later this week. The bipartisan bill is more than triple the amount Donald Trump proposed last week. Vice President Mike Pence held a briefing after the announcement.
The legislation implements the president's vision to ensure that not only do our federal agencies have the support and resources that they need, but also that our state and local partners have their support.
In the US, there have now been 11 deaths.
Now, in top corporate news, airline Flybe has gone into administration. That's after the failure of last-ditch talks on a government bailout. It comes amid pressure from the coronavirus outbreak, leaving Britain's biggest domestic carrier with little choice. The company ceased to trade, and it's no longer able to fly or take bookings.
And Facebook reported its first known infection within the company, the employee in Seattle, where everyone at the company is being encouraged to work from home until the end of the month. Microsoft has also told workers to do their jobs from home, if possible, until March 25th.
Now, OPEC Plus ministers are in Vienna for emergency talks on oil output and the wider market price. This, as NIHS Market says, oil demand is headed for its worst ever quarterly drop, and prices have slumped 20% this year alone. Yet Saudi Arabia and Russia remain split over the prospect of deeper production cuts as the coronavirus weakens global demand. Well, for more, we're joined now by Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Horden. So, Anne-Marie, just give us a sense of what the talks are about at this meeting in Vienna and if there's any prospect of reaching agreement.
Good morning. Yeah, there does seem to be a bit of prospect because we've been here before. We've seen this dance, this negotiation tug and pull between Moscow and Riyadh, and usually at the end, they're able to resolve their differences. But right now, the most bearish, at least for the market, would be just a rollover of the current cuts they have. On the more bullish side, and really I think what the Saudis are the ones that are pushing for, is a cut of at least 1 million to 1.5 million barrels a day, which would definitely help put a floor at least under some of these prices. The market is certainly expecting something. I've talked to a lot of traders, and they're saying they're expecting something around 1 million barrels a day, and they're saying that's what the market needs right now. But of course, this always comes down to the price. The Saudis would like the oil to be trading closer to $80 a barrel. That's what their budget calls for. While President Putin and Kremlin, they can balance their budget at $40 a barrel. So it's more urgent for the Saudis to get an agreement today than it would be for Moscow.
Yeah, and Anne-Marie, with the stakes this high, when you've got IHS Markit saying oil demand is heading for its worst ever quarterly drop, how realistic is there a risk that OPEC Plus will disappoint? And if it does, what kind of price moves could we see?
I mean, we could see, as Bernstein said, oil could go down to $40 a day. And they're saying that the decision will have a material impact on prices if they didn't act. The one other thing you need to think about, of course, is if they don't act, is it maybe a change in strategy for OPEC Plus? Because the more OPEC Plus continues to cut, the more other producers outside of them, most notably U.S. shale, is taking that market share. And yesterday was just an amazing explanation of that. American crude production surged to a record 13.1 million barrels a day yesterday. That's equivalent to almost half of what OPEC was putting out in February. So if they don't act, I think there'll be a big change of direction in strategy for Saudi and Russia want to continue this market share, to continue and gain back market share. Saudis especially, because they're the ones that have really been bearing the burden of these cuts. But we know behind closed doors, they want to come out, as I heard Prince Abdulaziz say, according to people close to the matter, he said this to a group when I was in Riyadh, they want to call the fire brigade. They don't want to use a garden hose in terms of comparing the coronavirus to a house on fire.
Yeah, and if in that sense then, how bad could it actually get on the demand side? I mentioned IHS Markit, but there have been so many calls out there.
It's a disaster when you think about flights canceled, schools closed, towns quarantined. I mean, just look at like the jet fuel curve. And for only the fourth time in almost 40 years, oil consumption may not grow at all this year. And that is something that is really a lot of traders and analysts on the street are starting to think is going to be the truth for 2020. Goldman Sachs just this week, they're the first majors of the Wall Street banks to forecast a contraction in demand this year. So it's absolute demand destruction for the energy market. Whether or not OPEC Plus wants to act, those are the discussions happening in Vienna. We definitely know the Saudis want to do something. Really, though, the ball is in President Putin in Moscow's court.
And finally, Anne-Marie, I mean, the issue we're seeing, I was reading a piece on the terminal this morning about shale, US shale oil coming through now in such a big way that it's a threat, really, to OPEC's position to a point where it begins to cause major problems for those countries.
Yeah, exactly. The plains of Texas and Oklahoma, that's what OPEC really needs to be worried about as well, besides the coronavirus. And that just highlights the magnitude and possibly the futility of OPEC's task. They are battling up against not just the demand destruction, but also the fact that U.S. shale is taking over so much market share. And, you know, I just go back to what we heard yesterday. The crude production in America surged to a record. America is surging to a record. At the same time, we have the Saudis willing to cut more just for a little bit on the price upside.
Anne-Marie, on the price upside, super quickly, if OPEC delivers, could we get much upside?
Market participants in this Bernstein survey expect the 1 million barrels a day, and they say that will support 40 to 50. I think a lot of it is priced in because a month ago, the technical committee said they have to cut 600,000.
Anne-Marie, thanks so much, Anne-Marie Horden there. Right, let's go straight to global news with Leanne Guerin, starting with an emergency summit in Moscow.
Yes, good morning, Roger. The leaders of Turkey and Russia are meeting to try to smooth out relations. The fresh standoff comes amid increased violence in Syria, but there's one reason the tensions might not get too bad. The countries now have much greater economic ties than they did in the past. Now more on the coronavirus outbreak. There was growing concerns big events like Tokyo Olympics could be postponed to contain COVID-19. Despite this, the IOC president, Thomas Bach, has reaffirmed his commitment to the success of the upcoming 2020 Summer Games in Tokyo. That's despite concerns about the coronavirus outbreak in the country. Japan's Olympics minister fueled speculation that the Games could be delayed. That was earlier this week. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's path to forming the next government there became even harder after near-final election results showed his lead narrowing. Bloomberg's Ivan Levingston has all the details.
His nationalist religious bloc shrank to 58 of Parliament's 120 seats. Only loss of one seat since exit polls, but in Israel's fractured political landscape, a seat or two can make all the difference between the formation of a government and a fourth back-to-back election. In Tel Aviv, Ivan Levingston, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Guerin. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we speak to Julian Chillingworth, CIO at Rathbones. We'll ask him how they're allocating £50.4 billion in assets in these market conditions. And the market conditions today were certainly looking more positive for European equities at the open. 40 minutes in, the Stock 600 is now down almost 0.2%. This is Bloomberg.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city in the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water? NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
The news you need from across the globe on Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us today at 5 a.m. on Bloomberg Daybreak.
As cases of the coronavirus continue to spread, we check market reaction with Matt Maley of Miller Tabak.
And we preview jobless claims ahead of Friday's February employment report.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5, followed by Bloomberg Surveillance at 7 on Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the is listening. The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European stocks are pairing earlier gains as investors weigh growing support from policymakers around the world against the spread of the coronavirus. The Stock 600 and the CAC 40 are both fairly flat, while the DAX is down 0.3%, the FTSE falling 0.6% here in London. At the same time, US equity futures are firmly in the red after California declared a state of emergency due to the outbreak. Meanwhile, treasuries are nudging higher after the curve steepened on Wednesday amid expectations for more US stimulus. The 10-year yield currently down more than 5 basis points, just below 1%. 10-year bond yields are gaining, though, up a basis point to a negative 63. 10-year gilt yields at 38 basis points. In currencies, the yuan has slipped a bit. It did recoup all the losses since the coronavirus outbreak, but now we're seeing it coming off those highs a bit. The offshore down 0.3% at 6.94. The yen is gaining, currently up 0.3% at 107.3 against the greenback, while the Bloomberg dollar spot index is flat. G10 currencies generally in a fairly tight range today. Sterling and the euro both unchanged. Finally, oil is gaining a bit today despite a split between Saudi Arabia and Russia over whether deeper production cuts are required to offset the demand hit from the coronavirus epidemic. OPEC Plus is meeting in Vienna today, sending WTI up about 0.5%, just below $47 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Ireland's leaders are facing mounting pressure to accelerate coalition talks. That's as Parliament returns against the backdrop of an unfolding coronavirus outbreak and a continuing surge in support for Sinn Féin. Lawmakers meeting in Dublin today have ditched a vote to choose a new Prime Minister, given the lack of progress in forming a new government since last month's election. Leo Varadkar will continue to lead a caretaker administration while talks do go on. Talks have been held in Westminster about the potential of Parliament closing its doors for months because of the coronavirus outbreak. Concerns have been raised about the well-being of members of the House of Lords, in particular, where the average age of peers is 70. Meanwhile, England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, is due to appear before a committee of MPs later this morning. And in the US, allies of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are discussing joining forces if Warren exits the campaign. That's according to the Washington Post. It comes after a poor showing on Super Tuesday for the Massachusetts senator. Yesterday, Michael Bloomberg pulled out of the race, endorsing former Vice President Joe Biden. A reminder, Bloomberg is a former and the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, the S&P 500 got a boost yesterday, up more than 4% as the US House passed an emergency spending bill to combat the impact of the coronavirus. It added to signs of support from policymakers around the world. That's as Europe scrambles to contain the outbreak. Among measures announced are a nationwide school closure in Italy that's said to last until March the 15th. We're seeing US futures actually firmly on the back foot now, down more than 1%, and European equities have also given up their gains. Julian Chillingsworth, CIO at Rathbones, is with us now in the London studio. Julian, good to see you. If we look at the S&P 500, it's recovered about 6% since Friday, but we're still down about 7 to 8% from the record. Are you looking... On Friday, let me start the question like this. It was about survival, not returns. Are you looking for returns right now, or are you just simply battening down the hatches and protecting the portfolio?
Morning. I would say to you that, in all honesty, we came into this virus scare in a reasonably defensive position, not obviously because of the virus scare, but we were more worried about a global slowdown in growth in 2020. So we haven't really altered our asset allocation, and I was just talking to one of your colleagues and saying that on top of the virus problems we're facing, we're also going through our quarterly asset allocation week, which we have at the beginning of each quarter. So there's been a lot to talk about. We sum up today, so I'm not going to say what changes we might make, but my colleagues and I debate that. But what I would say to you about the crisis is that I think that if you look at previous crises, particularly stock market markdowns, and I would take you back to 87, really, where you had in 87, and I see one of us probably was there along with me.
Thank you for that, Julian. Appreciate it.
I was there, not market sentient, but I was there.
And if you recall, Roger, there was a big sell-off, there was a pause, and then there was another down leg. And I suspect that we are in something similar. So we're in the consolidation phase, the eye of the storm, and I think that people will then realise how's this going to impact travel companies, how's it going to impact supply lines, and there will be a rebasing.
1987 was the portfolio insurance crash. Are there comparisons to be made?
No, but in market manias and crashes there are, because we're dealing with the unpredictability of humans, aren't we? And the way in which they react. Not the events will be different every time, but people's reactions are very similar.
And what makes this different, many people are saying, is it's both a supply side and a demand side problem. That's the fundamental, and a much harder to deal with. But since we are going back into history a bit, Ken Rogoff, Harvard University professor, he's been drawing up a suggestion that 1970s-style supply shortage-induced inflation jolt can't be ruled out. Now, that's a very interesting move, isn't it?
I mean, at the moment, no one's talking about any inflationary pressure, and I think that with very low oil prices and weakened commodity prices, it's not an issue. But obviously, yes, if we go 9-12 months hence, then he may turn out to have some merit in his argument, and I think it's far too early to say. I think that the other point I would make is that a lot of chat has been had about we're in a V or a U recovery. I think this is far too early to say. That I think that what we will find is that certain elements of the economy will be more badly affected than others, and that's to yet unravel.
When it's so early to say, and I know you're not going to tell us exactly what changes you're making, but is a sort of foolproof strategy to hold bonds, particularly when no one's pricing for inflation and we just keep seeing yields go ever and ever lower, not just in the US, but in the UK and in Germany as well?
You won't be surprised, Nira, that we had this discussion actually yesterday. I think that I would say to you, if you're in the Armageddon camp, and there are about 3 scenarios for this crisis, we have a recovery through March to June in the number of cases come down, and we gradually see a pickup in demand and economies return to not total normality but a better state. Or you're in the Armageddon camp, which is the extreme view, and that there's going to be a lot of people affected globally. There's going to be a much higher mortality rate than people are factoring in, and this will disrupt business and we will go into a deep recession. If you believe that, then you own government bonds. If you don't believe that, you probably are thinking to yourself, they look pretty expensive, particularly versus equities, and you may wish to look at a halfway house, convertibles, etc., or even look at something like higher yielding credits, and that may be a halfway house for you. But I think that you've got to make a decision where you think you are. If you're selling, if you own gilts or treasuries and you are selling now, you're taking a view one way or another. If you're sitting on your hands, which I suspect most people will do, you've got the insurance policy there, but I wouldn't commit more money at this time.
Makes sense. Now, on gilts, though, it was very interesting what we heard from Andrew Bailey in the sense that they're looking at this coordinated response, and the market, of course, pricing for an emergency rate cut from the BOE. What's your view on where gilt yields go if we get rate cuts, but we also get increased spending?
Well, I think we've obviously budget next week,
exactly.
and I think that there's likely to be the Chancellor's got his instructions already, hasn't he? So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of spending initiatives, and they were coming anyway, and I think these will be juiced up more. A rate cut, other than sentiment, in the short term, does very little. It helps sentiment, but I mean, it's 6 to 12 months before you see that transmission coming through to economies more generally. So I think there's got to be other things. The Chinese have been quite clever at the moment, and they've had a whole series of small initiatives, and that's what I think central banks and the government should think about, so that they drip feed these into the economy as they gauge how the economy is performing.
Well, let me take you up on China, because there's one interesting line I've been seeing, which is saying that because of their moving into a kind of recovery phase, into or post-viral phase, maybe too early to say it. They're building up some of their amounts of stuff they're going to send out to the world, and the world demand will not be there, and that's going to be the crisis 3 or 4 months going forward.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that may be the case. I think it's too early to predict. At the moment, if you just take the stark numbers, cases across the United States and in Europe are not high. I mean, obviously there are pockets, yes, but it's not in the same proportion as it is across Asia. And I don't know whether you read today, but the way in which this virus could disrupt life was highlighted by a reporter who was reporting from Seoul. And that was in the FT today. It's well worth reading, and it's a sort of a day in the life of someone in Seoul. And that shows how disruption can affect it, but at the moment that's not happening in other developed economies. So, so demand, I think, will still be there in the States, but, let's see where we are in June.
What should the Fed do next? Obviously, equity markets reacted badly to the emergency rate cut, but bond markets are pricing for more.
Yeah, I mean, he basically told you on Friday he was going to cut rates, and travelling and arriving, wasn't it? I mean, he cut rates, and it's, as always with the bond market, what next? The bond market is probably being more cautious than the equity market about this virus, and rightly so, you'd expect that. And so, consequently, I think we shall have to see, but more central bank initiatives.
Julian, thanks very much indeed. Julian Chillingworth, CIO at Rathbones, with us in the London studio. Caroline Hepker and Matt Miller back on Daybreak Europe next. Speaking to Chris Ralph, Chief Global Strategist at St James's Place. This is Bloomberg.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel-good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel-good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Mother's Day is coming up, so head to your local Asda in London. We've got flowers from £5. Thoughtful gifts, unforgettable prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Available between 18th and 22nd of March.
Supporting people to live life to the fullest. It's an amazing job to have. I'm Greg and I lead the team at a residential care home. I started as a care worker, but with all the training on the job, I'm now a manager here, looking after people like Mimi.
Greg really believes in me and has supported me to make better choices in my life.
6 years ago, I worked in security, keeping people out of places. Now I open doors for people instead. It's a great feeling.
If you want to make a difference to your life, care for someone else's, visit everydaysdifferent.com to find jobs in adult social care.
For up to 50% off a choice of floors and beds. For an extra 20% off selected ranges. There's something for everyone. Carpet Right. For life.
World, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else. But I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio. And, I was talking to our producer, Caroline, is American, Summer Sadi, so she doesn't really get all the British isms, the joy of living in London. When I was a kid hanging out in Chelsea, we would refer to today as Thirsty Thursday. This is the day when you would go, to work, just bring your toothbrush to Tiger and get on the lash. Is that still a thing? Is that just for the
you're
kids?
reminiscing very happily, aren't you? Yeah, on the lash, that is still definitely an expression, I suspect, that is common in the City of London. And yeah, I mean, look, given everything that's happening in the markets, the volatility and obviously the concern around coronavirus, I can imagine that, that will be on the minds of lots of people today.
I wonder if that's cancelled. Does coronavirus mean teleconference drinking? Do you not still go to the public house after work? Or
well, listen, it could well be one of the measures, could it not? Italy shut down the schools until the 15th of March, and they're thinking about, stopping public gatherings. So, yeah, definitely, it might be a question of getting a quick one in at the pub whilst you can. But look, shall I take us to the markets then briefly and give you the lowdown on what's happening there? Because, as I say, there has been such volatility. This morning, we opened up high on the US stock 600. We gained as much as 0.7%, but we're now down 0.2% on the US stock 600. The FTSE 100 also slumping 0.8%. The Xetra DAX down 0.4%. The coronavirus could push the UK to the edge of recession, according to Goldman Sachs. So there you have the worry that's really reflected in so many other countries that are suffering. Having said that, Japan's ruling party says that coronavirus will hit harder than the financial crisis, perhaps be worse than Lehman Brothers, and yet we saw the Shanghai comp erase all of the 2020 losses so far. So that is something to consider. Markets really, trying to understand how much they might benefit from stimulus like the US package versus the damage from the virus. The US S&P 500 futures at the moment currently very much weaker, Matt, down by 1.3% right now. This after the S&P 500 surged yesterday 4%, up 6% this week. Let's see if that continues today, if we see a bounce back. In terms of bond yields, also, I saw just a couple of minutes ago we were trading below 1%. We're actually bang on 1% for the US benchmark yield, down by 5.5 basis points, and we're at negative 62 for German bond yields as gold, the yen and oil all edge higher this morning, Matt.
Did you see the new car registrations, by the way?
No, tell me. I know you want to tell me.
UK new car registrations in February down 2.9%, which sounds bad, but it was down 7.3% in the previous month. So it's clearly a difficult time for the automakers, but maybe people aren't. Well, I guess they're certainly still buying fewer cars than they were a year ago, but they're not buying them as at such a quick rate as fewer cars such a quick rate as they were the month before.
Nothing like what happened in China, of course, where sales absolutely
80% was the drop in China. That is enormous. Let's get over right now to Chris Ralph. He was my guest on Bloomberg Television today, and he joins us in the London radio studio, chief strategist at St. James Place Wealth Management. Chris, let me first ask you about the car market. I mean, we knew it was going to be rough, and now that the coronavirus has hit, it seems unbelievable that car sales could fall year over year 80%. Basically, you're looking at moving almost nothing off the lot in China. In the UK, it's not nearly as bad, of course, but it's still a contraction. Have we seen peak auto? Is it done and by?
Well, I think there's a longer-term theme going on here, Matt, that if you look at the younger generation, more of them are using services like Uber or Lyft. Less of them are passing their driving tests and wanting to either drive themselves or indeed own a car, and therefore the world is changing for the automakers. I was talking on Bloomberg Television earlier about stocks that I don't think I'd want to own, and I think owning some of the car companies over the next 10 years might prove to be a very troubling investment as they need to transform their businesses from internal combustion engine orientated businesses, which is what they've been doing for the last 100 years, into ones of either producing power from electrical production or maybe even hydrogen.
Okay, yeah. I mean, just this week we've got 20 mile an hour limits in all of the central streets in London. So yeah, you can see how that might be.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
that's the maximum speed you're allowed to drive?
Yes, it's really grim.
But Matt, at the end of the day, if you're doing 20 miles an hour around London, you're doing extremely well, because London is so gridlocked it hardly ever moves at 20 miles an hour.
That's
right, because they've blocked all the streets with gigantic bicycle lanes, I guess.
Yes, that's true.
So mostly people are just sitting there idling their engines, making the air even dirtier.
Well, interestingly, there is a problem being created by the number of bicycles on the street. And I speak as a cyclist. The but it's creating more pollution because cars are in bigger jams. So there are interesting implications of changes in travel policy.
Yeah, they've just completely changed the road outside of my house to be full of cycle lanes. But look, away from cycle lanes and car makers, what about the big picture in the markets at the moment? After yesterday's US House bill, this emergency spending bill, how much cheer does that give to the markets? We've seen really an unusual reaction in the markets in terms of the Fed rate cut that didn't seem to do enough, and now this House bill. Is that going to lead the way for others to follow suit in terms of stimulus?
Well look, Caroline, I'm of the view that actually quite a lot of the rise in the S&P was much more about the Super Tuesday result rather than actually what was happening in terms of stimulus or rate cuts or the coronavirus focus, because I think the markets are saying they would much prefer a Democratic candidate of Biden rather than Sanders. So I think there might be a bit of a red herring going on, and I think the reaction from the US futures as we see them open today and the initial signal that European markets were going to be opening firmer and now they're falling, I think is indicative of that. So my view is that stimulus is very important, but what needs to happen in the US and indeed in Europe outside of Italy is getting control of testing people for the virus, and that is proving to be a big issue at this current time.
We are seeing, a couple of red headlines coming across that illustrate the impact of the coronavirus. On the human side, Switzerland is reporting its first coronavirus death. So on the human side, we see it still continues to take its toll. On the market side, 7&I is abandoning its plans to acquire Marathon Speedway. This according to Nikkei. You can't be sure that that's related, but this seems to throw a lot of plans up in the air. If you step back, Chris, and take the 35,000 foot view, I imagine that your choices are, I guess there are three choices. You could just keep your positions in risk assets and try and weather the storm. You could try and cut your losses here and go into insurance assets, safe haven assets, or you could go and look for places to buy the dip. What do you think? Am I right that those are the three choices, and what do you think the right choice is?
Well, I think it's a mixture of 1 and 3, and certainly predominance being on 1. Howard Marks was writing very eloquently about this over the weekend, sort of talking about the fact that when you get these market dips, that's a great opportunity for stalwart investors to be making money over the longer term, because I think you've still absolutely got to focus on the longer term. And what I do think can happen is that for good companies who are seeing unwarranted share price falls, that's a great buying opportunity for fund managers who are saying the price fall is unjustified in a company whose outlook actually hasn't changed, or even you could argue has improved. So a company like Amazon or Netflix, who may benefit from the fact that people are being forced to stay at home, why are their share prices falling?
Yeah, indeed. Well, that's something that we're going to watch very closely. As I see the FTSE 100 now down by 1.1% this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris Ralph, Chief Global Strategist at St James's Place Wealth Management. Great to have you on Bloomberg Television and Radio this morning.
Now let's get over to Leanne Gerrans for your world. Wait, is it Roger? Is it Roger?
It's Roger.
Yeah.
Roger.
Afraid it's me, Matt. Never mind. Anyway,
I'm happy to hear you, Roger. Let's get over to Roger Hearing right now with your World National News headline.
Excellent. Well, here it is. In China, over 3,000 people have died from the coronavirus so far. Around 52,000 have recovered or been released from hospital. And globally, the number of confirmed cases is now around 95,000. But some good news. The growth in infections in South Korea does seem to be slowing. With over 5,500 cases, it's the biggest outbreak outside China. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Turkish counterpart, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, will try to patch up their partnership at the latest Syria summit in Moscow today. Bloomberg's Henry Meyer reports.
After the deadliest fighting yet between Turkey and Russia-backed Syrian forces, there's no guarantee of a breakthrough as the two presidents try to reconcile competing goals in Syria's northwest Idlib province that are ratcheting up tensions. In Moscow, Henry Meyer, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, there are growing concerns about big events like the Tokyo Olympics could be postponed to contain the virus. Despite this, the IOC president, Thomas Bach, is reaffirming his commitment to the success of the upcoming 2020 Summer Games in Tokyo.
I can tell you that today in the meeting of the executive board, neither the word cancellation nor the word postponement was even mentioned.
Now, speculation the Games could be delayed due to the virus were fueled by comments from the Japanese Olympics minister. And in the US, allies of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are discussing joining forces if Warren exits the campaign. That's according to the Washington Post, and it comes after a poor showing on Super Tuesday for the Massachusetts senator. Yesterday, Mike Bloomberg pulled out of the race, endorsing the former vice president, Joe Biden. And just a reminder, Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Roger. Now, let's get this morning's sports news then. Here's Colin Besley, starting with the latest on an incident during a Spurs-Norwich game.
Tottenham boss Jose Mourinho says he'll support Eric Dyer after the midfielder climbed into the stands to confront a fan last night. It happened after Spurs went out on penalties to Norwich in the 5th round of the FA Cup following a 1-1 draw in North London. Norwich will host the winner of tonight's match between Derby and Manchester United in the quarter-finals. Holders Manchester City head to Newcastle next after getting past Sheffield Wednesday 1-0. Leicester beat Birmingham 1-0 and will face Chelsea. The other last 8 ties see Sheffield United take on Arsenal. Informed Leeds have the chance to go to the top of the Rugby League Super League this evening. Their former coach Brian McDermott returns to Headingley with current side Toronto Wolfpack, who are bottom of the table, and Tommy Fleetwood will hope to bounce back from missing out on his first PGA Tour golf title when he starts the Arnold Palmer Invitational this evening. World number 1 Rory McIlroy tees off alongside Justin Rose in Orlando at lunchtime.
Let's get to U.S. sports now with Pete Fox. Pete?
From the night on the association, Celtics get back to winning, posting the W over the Cavs in Cleveland, 112-106. Jason Tatum, another big night, 32 points and 9 boards. In Brooklyn, apparently that overtime win over the Celtics took a little bit out of the Nets as they fall to the Grizz, 118-79. Knicks lose at home, coming up short at the Garden to the Jazz, 112-104. Julius Randle, 32-11. And in Portland at the Moda Center, Trailblazers take care of the Wiz with ease, 125-104. Bradley Beal had 29. And from the night on the ice in D.C., Capitals fall to the Flyers after giving up 3 in the second, 5-2 the final. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Okay, that's the sports news. Coming up next, we talk about Bloomberg Opinion, our column about pizza deliveries being exposed to the virus, the precariat. We talk the gig economy with Bloomberg Opinion columnist Lionel Law. What does it mean as the virus spreads for those workers? This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient.
That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
Had to be independent and take initiative, and that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
The IMF is making available $50 billion to help countries deal with the coronavirus. For more on the economic and market fallout from the epidemic, I want to get to David Kotak, Chairman and Chief Investment Officer of Cumberland Advisors, who joins us now from Sarasota, Florida. So, David, every day is a different story. Obviously, we're getting more deaths, more bad news from around the world. We've got the Biden surprise upset here in the United States. We've got the rate cut. Where is this leading you on strategy?
Well, we have focused on this high volatility, Emily, 1,000 up, 1,000 down, 1,000 up, 1,000 down. It's extraordinary volatility. We're going to see more of it, we believe. We are sector conscious, so we don't have any exposure in transportation. You just had a discussion on airlines. We are worried about hospitality, cruise ships, and we're worried about some aspects in the credit markets. We're starting to see spreads widen, so we have to be careful about that. We are overweight the U.S. healthcare sector. The U.S. healthcare sector should be owned in the face of the market volatility because it has such a positive outlook for the sector.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Anne-Marie Harder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Let's kick it off in Asia. We have the CSI 300 closing up more than 2%, closing at a 2-year high. Although we did see European equities rally originally, they are turning negative on the day. The Stoxx 600 is down 0.5%, and all major indices across Europe have turned to the red, alongside U.S. futures. S&P 500 futures down 1.5%, even after, though, yesterday we had the S&P 500 close up more than 4%. Of course, this comes as we have California declaring a state of emergency due to the virus, possibly putting more pressure on these global equities, which have seen a lot of volatility in. On the 10-year yield, we're still flirting with that 1% level. Right now, we have spot 9.95%. The Japanese yen as well climbing. We see money continue to look for safety. And then in commodities, it's all about oil for today and the next Friday. It's 48 hours of oil, really. We have Brent crude trading at 51.20 on the barrel. Saudi Arabia and Russia split over deeper production cuts in Vienna. The question is this smoke and mirror to surprise the market, or is there serious contention between the two players? That's a Bloomberg Business Flash, and here's Roger Herring for more of what's going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Now, Italy has announced the nationwide closure of schools and universities until March the 15th. That's as it redoubles efforts to curb the worst outbreak of coronavirus in Europe. The government's considering other measures too, including a ban on public conferences and cultural events. Milan, Venice and neighbouring regions are already in near lockdown. The likelihood of recent extreme bushfires in Australia being repeated has risen by 30%. That's according to a new study. The latest report says climate change is adding to the risk by compounding associated factors such as severe drought. The season's fires raised an area the size of England, killed dozens of people, destroyed thousands of homes and devastated wildlife. The virus has also hit the world's most famous spy. The new Bond movie was scheduled for release next month, but is being put back to at least November. Hollywood's also feeling the effects of the crisis, with production halted on the latest installment of Mission Impossible. The latest Bond film is entitled No Time to Die. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's just gone 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined today by opinion columnist Lionel Laurent, who's writing about how the coronavirus outbreak is affecting the gig economy in particular and what can be done about it. Because, Lionel, it can only be bad, right? I mean, these are people who just can't take days off.
Exactly. These are people that can't afford to be sick, and I think that they're an interesting part of the economy in a crisis like this, because they're on the one hand seeing demand go up in some cases, because as you can imagine, if more people stay home and if your Deliveroo rider or your Uber driver delivering food to you is a kind of lifeline to the outside world, you want to use more of those services. However, if those workers are at the same time risking their health to work and also at the same time facing an economic slowdown, because let's face it, in an economic slowdown, all demand is going to drop eventually, then I think they are doubly exposed.
Yeah, I was absolutely amazed. I had to look up how many gig economy workers there are in the UK, 4.7 million. And if you include 0 hours contract workers, that means more than 5 million people in that space, which I was kind of shocked to discover. So it's not sort of as if it's a small problem, although the government here, for example, is giving sick pay to people sooner than they would otherwise get it. That was sort of one of their offers in the midst of the virus outbreak.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you should include some of the other jobs that don't get thought about. 0 hours contracts in the UK affects all sectors: leisure, retail, health care, social care. All of these sectors aren't really thought about when you say gig economy, but they're obviously facing double exposure from a crisis like this. And what's scary is it also shows you how even if you have a contract, even if you have a job, there are crises and situations where actually you're still coming into work, whatever the weather, because you just can't afford to get sick.
Now, there are some jurisdictions where courts have decided that Uber drivers are not freelancers, that they actually work for Uber. How is that developing, that debate?
So it's definitely better than it was a few years ago. You can tell that the rise of unions and unionization and politics as well coming to grips with this new sector of the economy, that's woken people up. So we are seeing laws such as in California, there's a brand new law essentially saying that it's a lot harder to say that your workers are not employees, but that's still being challenged in the courts, and there will always be a debate around, is it going too far? Aren't these really efficient ways for people to work? Are we holding back work? My view is more that's the long-term fight. My short-term argument is to say, let's think about what we can do now. We have the emergency rate cut from the Federal Reserve. The OECD is recommending straightforward handouts. Hong Kong is eyeing a cash handout. I think it's time to think about fiscal stimulus, universal basic income. These kind of experiments are what a crisis like this calls for, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Universal basic income, which has been a sort of growing popular idea, even sort of put forward by Facebook.
Wait, exactly. You think people are behind the idea of just handing out free money?
Well, increasingly, yeah. I mean, if you look,
I was being sarcastic. I mean, I love it. Helicopter money, basic income. Well, it's a very libertarians in the U.S. have really gravitated towards that, and in Switzerland they basically do it, right?
Well, you'd be surprised. It's still pretty controversial because the minute you propose it, someone says either look at the cost, because if you propose even a very small basic income in the U.S., that could run to annual costs in the billions if it's for everyone. Or people say, well, we've tried it before and it hasn't worked. So I think it's still very much at the experimental stage. But it is interesting that people like Facebook co-founder Chris Hughes and obviously the presidential one-time candidate Andrew Yang got a lot of support from Silicon Valley workers because they were talking about this, and it is an idea that the sort of foot soldiers of capitalism today like.
It is fascinating indeed. Lionel, thanks so much for joining us. Lionel Laurent is a Bloomberg opinion columnist. You can get his work and the work of his colleagues by typing OPIN Go. I'd say it's one of my favorite areas on the Bloomberg terminal, and an admission that I typically read it on my mobile phone, right? So you can get it on your phone as well. Under the news tab, you can then drop down and click on Bloomberg Opinion.
Yeah, really great stuff. Straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak here, we're going to talk more about the spread of coronavirus and how major banks are considering moving their operations to backup locations, exploring the outbreak and what it means for the City of London. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Japan's Olympics ministers said it would be theoretically possible to delay this summer's Tokyo Olympics to a later date in 2020 amid worries the coronavirus could cause the Games to be canceled for the first time since World War II. Seiko Hashimoto told a parliamentary committee the delay within the calendar year was possible under the terms in which Tokyo was awarded the Games. Hashimoto said, though, Japan was pressing ahead with the currently planned July 24th start. She also said that she understood from comments made by International Olympics Committee member Dick Pound that the end of May would be a key stage for the decision. Organizers say, though, they would be more likely to call the event off than delay it or move it elsewhere due to costs and logistics. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr, brought to you by Grainger, America's trusted source for industrial and safety supplies. Visit Grainger.com.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit BurdenLLP.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Hey! If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
For up to 50% off a choice of floors and beds. For an extra 20% off selected ranges. For something for everyone. Carpet Right. For life.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town, or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres, ends 18th of March.
Did you know your favourite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. This is Daybreak Europe.
And here in London, good morning, I'm Caroline Hepger, standing in for Anna Edwards, who's anchoring on television this morning.
And we are seeing a little bit of a volatile day in terms of the equity indexes. We started out to the upside, and now we have dropped. The FTSE 100 down 1.2% after having gained more than 0.5% earlier. So big swings in equities. The DAX off 120 points right now at 87.91. In terms of other risk indicators, we see the U.S. 10-year yield bouncing back and forth between more than 1 and less than 1%. Right now, trading at 0.995. German bonds yields are rising, but they're still negative 62 basis points. Gilt yields are rising as well, but right now they're only 38.5 basis points. U.S. dollar losing strength against the yen. You can buy 107 yen even, almost even, 107.03 yen for your U.S. dollar. And gold continues to rise this morning, right now 16.4371 a troy ounce. By the way, we're all watching oil very closely because of this OPEC Plus meeting in Vienna, but the price isn't doing much at all. Right now, Brent crude is up 16 cents to $51.29 a barrel.
Well, that's a story we'll follow this morning. But also coronavirus. As it spreads, British bankers are preparing to use trading sites that are miles from London City and Canary Wharf. Goldman Sachs is actually actively testing its backup trading operations in Croydon, whilst JP Morgan is said to be considering moving staff to backup sites in London and also Basingstoke. At the same time, the financial regulator is making sure that the contingency planning doesn't result in scrimping on compliance. This is a great story written in part by Bloomberg's Viren Varghela, who joins me in the London studio. Really good to speak to you, Viren. Of course, as we're all focused on the coronavirus and the spread in the UK, companies of all kinds, trying to figure out what to do. What are the banks prepping in particular? What are their plans now?
Yeah, so the banks are starting to be anxious about how this may affect their trading operations. Obviously, this is a big revenue generator for them. I mean, they generate more than $160 billion from trading, and they're testing their backup sites. Goldman is testing in Croydon, JP Morgan in Basingstoke, 45 miles from London. They're making sure these sites have the systems in place, have recorded lines, they can send the orders through, and in case the virus spreads more widely.
I have to ask, as an American, about Croydon. I don't know much about it, but it doesn't seem to me like a place that bankers tend to hang out. I remember people used to describe Colleen Rooney's hairstyle as a Croydon facelift, and it's listed as not necessarily the safest, most beautiful area. I mean, when I Google it, I don't see this being a place where, traders from JP Morgan or any of these big banks would want to hang out. Am I wrong? Is Croydon great?
I think you're right. It'll be a big change for some of these traders. They're used to having long days in the city, going to, rooftop bars in fancy restaurants, and Croydon probably has much less of that. You might not be able to get your turmeric latte at the coffee shop there.
Okay, other than the working day, which of course is significant, what does it actually mean, though, potentially for trading? Because I noticed that the FCA has gotten in there really early to sort of say, look, the backup systems have got to be right.
No, that's absolutely correct. The FCA has issued a statement yesterday. It's obviously big concerned. It's liaising with the Treasury and the banks to make sure that backup systems are properly implemented. They want recorded lines. They don't want them to, as you say, skimp on compliance. It's something very important. There's been billions of dollars in fines in misconduct over the past 10 years, and they want to make sure that just because it's a backup site, there aren't any changes to compliance.
I've just Googled Basingstoke, by the way, and it looks much more idyllic. I feel like if I was going to have to spend time in one of these places, I'd rather go to Basingstoke. Where else are British banks putting their sort of backup trading floors? Where else are they keeping their contingency plans?
Well, Morgan Stanley is testing near Heathrow Airport, which could be, well, given a lot of the banks have travel bans, it may not be ideal either. And Citi is in Lewisham, which is in southeast London. So yeah, none of these are very glamorous locations, but given the severity of the situation or the threat of the severity, it needs must.
Yeah, I suppose that what struck me more than the beauty or desirability of Croydon and Basingstoke more is their location, like the difficulty of actually
is still assessing the impact that the spreading coronavirus outbreak might have on South Africa's economy. More news on that is expected at the MPC briefing in 2 weeks. In Johannesburg, Paul Richardson, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg Mad.
Roger, thanks very much. Now let's get the U.S. sports report. For that, we go to Pete Fox. Pete?
On the NBA scoreboard in Brooklyn, the Nets come up short to the Grizz, way short, 118-79. Knicks lose as well, falling to the Jazz at the Garden, 112-104. Julius Randle, a nice night in the loss, finishing with 32 points and 11 boards. Trailblazers take down the Wiz by 21. And Boston gets back to winning after that overtime loss to the Nets. They take care of business on the road in Cleveland against the Cavs, 112-106, led by Jason Tatum's 32 points and 9 boards. And from the night on the ice, the Capitals let one slip, losing to the Flyers in D.C. 5-2. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Okay, so that's the sports roundup. Now, coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, should we be more worried about the impact of the coronavirus following the Fed's surprise interest rate cut? Well, Daniel Morris, senior investment strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management, says yes. He joins us next in the studio. Matt, as we look at a drop of 0.7% for the Euro Stoxx 600. So that initial bounce higher that we saw in stocks after the positive trading session in Asia really has dissipated. The worry around coronavirus is clear. FTSE 100 down by 1.3%. This as also US futures at the moment pointing very much more negative, down 1.5% for S&P 500 E-mini futures.
Yeah, the trading band has been pretty incredible. We've seen the FTSE gaining more than 0.25%, down 1.33%. We thought that European bourses might need to catch up a little to the big gains of the U.S. yesterday, but as some have suggested, maybe that was a Super Tuesday bounce and nothing to do with the coronavirus stimulus. This is Bloom.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
No company wants to be involved in an international dispute. But when disagreements arise, you need expertise at your side. Take a closer look at ICDR, the International Center for Dispute Resolution. Backed by the longevity and strength of the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of cross-border dispute resolution services, handling more cases than any other institution. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve?
Mother's Day is coming up, so head to your local Asda in London. We've got flowers from £5. Thoughtful gifts, unforgettable prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Available between 18th and 22nd of March.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
For up to 50% off a choice of floors and beds. For an extra 20% off selected ranges. For first-class fitting.
Morning.
For 0% free credit with no deposit. For a nice surprise.
Ooh.
For bringing home a bargain. For heaven at long last. Carpet Right. For life. Up to 4 years interest-free credit. Minimum spend applies.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
Down the right side of the lane, stops at the elbow jumper, up and good!
TuneIn is your destination for college basketball, and it's free. This week we have a must-hear game, North Carolina at Duke.
Two for the win! No, tapped up by more! And in at the buzzer! More banks it in!
This Saturday, tip-off is at 6 p.m. Eastern. With college basketball and TuneIn, hear every call from games around the country live. Search college sports to listen free today. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Movies like Contagion and Outbreak, not to mention all the cell phone images from disease-stricken countries, have made Americans pandemic voyeurs.
Now, for the first time, we're facing the probability that we will not just be witnessing, we'll be experiencing. And then we'll find out, what is the mettle of Americans?
Catch this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning. From Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, I'm Anne McCordern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. While I started the day higher, especially in Asia, the CSI 300 closing up more than 2%, closing at a two-year high. We are now negative in Europe, sharply lower this hour, down 0.9% on the Stock 600. And a number of the companies that came out in Europe today to talk about the impact of the coronavirus are down more than 9%. ITV, Continental, and Cineworld. U.S. futures also pointing to a lower start on Wall Street. S&P 500 futures down 1.5%. Very different story to yesterday when they closed up more than 4%. This could be due to the fact that California declared a state emergency due to the virus, so clearly still fears in the market. The 10-year yield now falling back under 1% after rising above it yesterday and earlier today. Signs investors still want more action from the Fed. That emergency cut doesn't just seem to be enough. The Japanese yen climbing. We see money continue looking for safety. And speaking of safety, gold trading $1,643 an ounce, up 0.4%. And in commodities, oil will be a very important story for the next 48 hours. A barrel of Brent trading right now $51.17. Saudi Arabia and Russia split in Vienna over deeper production cuts. Question, this smoke and mirrors, they want to surprise the market, or is there serious contention between Moscow and Riyadh? That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Roger Hearing from what's more going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Thanks for that. Now, in the US, the House has passed a $7.8 billion emergency spending bill. That's to fund the government's response to the coronavirus outbreak. Meanwhile, California has declared a state of emergency to tackle the virus. In the US, up to now, there have been 11 deaths. Talks have been held in Westminster about the potential of Parliament closing its doors for months because of the coronavirus outbreak. Concerns have been raised about the well-being of members of the House of Lords in particular, where the average age of peers is 70. Meanwhile, England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, is due to appear before a committee of MPs later this morning. In the US, allies of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are discussing joining forces if Warren exits the campaign. That's according to the Washington Post. Now, it comes after a poor showing on Super Tuesday for the Massachusetts senator. Yesterday, Michael Bloomberg pulled out of the race, endorsing the former Vice President Joe Biden. Just a reminder, Bloomberg is founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Roger, thanks very much for that. Now let's get over to Nathan Hager right now out of... Are you in the D.C. studio, Nathan?
I am indeed.
Yes, in the D.C. studio, Nathan Hager joining us, getting ready for
the heart of political risk.
America's. Yeah, and I guess they're passing out more money now. So That's
the thing. I mean, and that was what seemed to drive that 4% rally for U.S. stocks yesterday. But now we're looking at futures this morning, giving some of that back as investors continue to grapple with coronavirus headlines. The state of emergency in California and the rising death toll is adding to volatility in this U.S. market. We're going to get reaction from equity strategist Julian Lafargue at Barclays, Matt Maley of Miller Tabak. They're both going to join us this morning to try to sort through all the latest developments with the coronavirus. Plus, we're going to be keeping an eye on that OPEC plus ministerial meeting in Vienna today, just as the coronavirus is eating into global energy demand. Are ministers going to agree to supply cuts? And speaking of political risk to markets, investors did seem to like the result from Super Tuesday. Karen Moscow and I will track the difficult path ahead for Bernie Sanders as we get you going here on Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Matt?
Looking forward to it. Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager coming up if you're listening on Sirius XM with Daybreak Americas. If you're tuned in on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear, I guess, Tom Keene. I'm not sure if Anna's going to stay with Tom. In any case, Tom Keene will be there, and he may be joined by Anna. Maybe Francine comes back in. Who knows? But it'll be Tom and somebody on surveillance.
Exactly. Great stuff. Well, let's talk a little bit more then about the coronavirus and reaction to it. The US House of Representatives passed a $7.8 billion emergency spending bill to fund the response to the virus outbreak in the US. It follows the Fed's surprise cut earlier this week, and it comes as Italy is announcing more measures to contain the virus there. Also, markets now fully pricing in a Bank of England rate cut this month. For more, let's bring in Daniel Morris, Senior Investment Strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management. Daniel, you've been arguing that monetary and fiscal stimulus will only have limited benefits, but obviously that's all we've got. We've got to do it. The UK, France and Italy potentially face recession because of the virus.
Well, exactly. This isn't happening at the best time, you could say, certainly when it comes to continental Europe and even the UK. You know, you had relatively low growth rates over the last year, decelerating growth in several, and of course a few countries in Europe that had negative growth rates. So it's not the time that you want a negative shock. And all the questions we had about what the ECB would do when a recession showed up, well, that may have been brought much more forward as we're starting to think about that today, as opposed to in a couple years the way we had hoped.
But, I mean, can the ECB do anything anyway? Will it make a difference if they cut 10 or 20 basis points deeper into negative territory? Or are you expecting more asset purchase program action?
Well, it would certainly make a difference. It's a question of whether it would be a positive difference or a negative difference. And I think the lesson that generally has been learned over the last couple of years is that negative interest rates seemingly, at least at this point, are doing more harm than good. So on one hand, it still is a tool for them, particularly if they want to weaken the euro. We've had surprising strength in the euro because of the ability of the U.S. Fed to cut rates and the perceived inability of the ECB to do so. If they try to offset that by bringing rates more negative, that would help on the currency front, but then would hurt on the financial sector front. So it's, as always, a pretty difficult outlook for them trying to find what they can do that has positive impact.
Do you think there is going to then be some more coordination when it comes to government action? There's been a lot of talk in recent weeks about Germany also opening the taps in terms of stimulus. How likely do you think that is to happen? Obviously, given that the House has passed this bill, the Senate has to too, this emergency spending bill, California declaring a state of emergency.
I think it's probably pretty likely, and at a minimum, you're going to also see a more accommodating attitude from the European Commission when it comes to, for example, Italy breaching its deficit targets that it's supposed to meet. So I think from that point of view, I think the European Commission and their governments will appreciate that in the short term, this is exactly the moment when you want to use some deficit spending to support the economy against a negative shock, and then we'll worry about fiscal stability and all those other metrics a bit later.
So do you expect any of this to actually happen, Daniel, or do you see us going into recession in a number of different European economies?
No, we're not projecting recessions at this point, but clearly the question is we have so much uncertainty about how this is going to play out, and even as we try to look to previous epidemics for parallels, the one lesson you actually get from those is every one of these is different, the way they spread, mortality rates, and everything else. So it's of limited help when we try to forecast how this is going to go. So at this point, with what we know so far, and with the stimulus, we do anticipate, we hope that any kind of sustained recession, as opposed to, say, a technical recession, will be avoided. But there's still a reasonably wide confidence interval or unconfidence interval around that.
How do you respond then in terms of, asset allocation and actually what you do now this week, given that we've got record low rates, the US now below 1% for the 10-year, and then we've had this massive volatility, huge sell-off in equities, followed by a couple of days of gains, bumps higher. It's very unpredictable.
Yes, well, we probably would not suggest people try to day trade or time any of this. The one thing certainly that's come out is the return of volatility, and as you point out, from one day euphoria to the next day despair, it makes it quite challenging to have any kind of medium-term view. We do have a medium-term view, however, which is still actually broadly constructive. If we step back and think about our Goldilocks framework, which is supportive central banks, modest growth, certainly no threat from inflation, broadly speaking, we think that's still there. So what that means for us in terms of asset allocation then is we are buying the dips. That's what we've done over the last month or so. We anticipate doing that again, which means there'll be opportunities when markets go down. But we think that's going to be a buying opportunity.
Are you active there, or are you passively buying dips? I mean, it seems like the whole market is shifting to passive anyway, so...
Well, that raises, I think a much broader and very valid point that, to the degree that investors are using passive, they forego the opportunity to do exactly this. So we're very active around it. We think when markets are like this, that's what gives you the opportunity to outperform. And you can't do that by definition if you're in a passive vehicle.
Just very briefly on the point about inflation. So then the Ken Rogoff line that inflation actually could rear its head again because of the coronavirus. You're not a buyer of that line?
Well, I guess it comes down to how you define inflation. And from a central bank's point of view, they're looking at kind of long-term core inflation trends as opposed to a short-term shock. So certainly it could. You saw a bit the same thing when tariffs went up, but it's not the kind of inflation that we're really worried about over the long term.
All right, thanks very much for joining us. Daniel Morris, Senior Investment Strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management. He will be going on to television, and I've sorted out, with the help of my producer, kind of a surprising little detail. So guess who's joining Tom Keene?
Who?
Guy Johnson.
Okay.
So Guy normally, of course, anchors the European close. We'll be filling in for Francine Lacroix, who is out today, and joining Tom Keene on the surveillance team. You'll hear that if you're tuned in on London DAB Digital Radio, and you'll hear more from Daniel Morris as well. If you're tuned in on Sirius XM, good morning. Daybreak Americas is up next. This is Bloomberg.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
TuneIn's your destination for college basketball, and it's free.
Down the right side of the lane, jumper up and down.
This week, we have a must-hear game. North Carolina at Duke.
2 for the win! No, tapped up by more! And it is the buzzer! More banks get in!
This Saturday, tip-off is at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Kimball right of the lane against the SU zone to Warren.
With college basketball on TuneIn, you can hear every call from games around the country live. Search college sports to listen free today. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and tune in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of Tune In.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, March 5th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. futures fall after yesterday's 4% rally on Wall Street.
California calls a state of emergency because of the coronavirus.
And the House authorizes nearly $8 billion in spending to combat the deadly outbreak.
A rare rebuke from Chief Justice Roberts to Senator Schumer, plus pressure mounts against Elizabeth Warren from Bernie Sanders supporters to drop out of the race. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Knicks and Nets both lost at home, and in the Big East, St. John's lost and Seton Hall fell short to Villanova.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS.
And again, futures are lower. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 50 points. Dow futures down 398. And NASDAQ futures down 146. The DAX in Germany is down 1.1%. CAC in Paris down 1.2%. And the FTSE 100 down 1.4%. Nikkei 225 in Japan jumped 1.1%, while the Hang Seng in Hong Kong gained 2.1%. 10-year Treasury up 22.30 seconds. The yield 0.98%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.62%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.3% or 15 cents at $46.62 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1%, up $1.80 to $16.44.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1177 against the dollar, and the yen 106.92. Nathan.
Karen, we begin this morning with late-breaking developments here in the U.S. regarding the coronavirus. Nearly $8 billion in emergency funding to deal with the outbreak has passed in the House. Bloomberg's Bob Moon begins our global team coverage.
The yeas are 415, the nays are 2.
It now heads to the Senate, where swift passage is likely. The president is sure to sign it.
I asked for $2.5 billion. It looks like they're going to give us $8.5 billion. So I think I should say I'll take it.
$3 billion would be dedicated to research and development for medicines and diagnostic tests. Almost $1 billion for medical supplies and preparedness. Vice President Mike Pence pledged that not just federal agencies, but local health officials will get the resources they need. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Bob, thank you. California Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency. And Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
The governor says this comes after confirmation of 53 coronavirus cases and a death. He says the state is monitoring 9,400 people in 49 counties for potential exposure.
The proclamation is to serve to help advance our resources, to loosen up our regulatory environment.
He says the state will get $37 million of the federal $8 billion spending package. Meanwhile, a cruise ship that made a San Francisco to Mexico and then Hawaii cruise is being recalled to San Francisco with several of the passengers suffering flu-like symptoms. It arrives today. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thanks. And that news out of California is having an impact on U.S. futures this morning. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the latest. Good morning, John.
Yeah, all major indices down over 1%. Chalk it up to uncertainty. That's reflected in the decline in the futures and the higher volatility. The S&P 500 has gained or lost at least 2.8% or more in 4 of the past 5 sessions. There are massive competing forces in markets right now, according to Alan Lance at lanceglobal.com.
It's a battle of the uncertainty of the coronavirus, versus incredible amount of cash on the sidelines.
In an exclusive interview with Bloomberg, St. Louis Fed President James Bullard defended the recent emergency rate cut.
But the downside risks have increased here, and so we want to take that on board and get some insurance to make sure we can keep the expansion going.
A well-known dove, yet a non-voter on the Fed currently, he said markets are wrong to assume that the central bank will cut rates again at the policy meeting in 2 weeks because it's unlikely officials will know much more by then about how the coronavirus has affected the outlook. The S&P 500 surged up 4% yesterday, but traders are still debating whether that was the result of any improving outlook or the result of Super Tuesday. John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, John, that rally on Wall Street yesterday did fuel stocks in Asia higher for a fourth straight session. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally has that recap from Singapore. Good morning.
Good morning,
Juliet.
Nathan and Karen. China's CSI 300 was up 2.2% to hold near mid-January highs, recovering its post-Lunar New Year sell-off amid expectations of more targeted stimulus from Chinese authorities. The ASX 200 was up more than 1% in Sydney to close at 6,395 points, its best gain in a month, as Australia's finance minister said stimulus will come very soon. Japan's Nikkei 225 was up more than 1% to 21,329 points, despite strength in the yen, while in India, shares in Yes Bank were up the most since October, as Bloomberg reported the Indian government has approved a rescue plan for Yes Bank involving a capital injection by a consortium led by the State Bank of India. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thank you. Stocks in Europe initially followed Asia higher, but have now turned lower. Let's get the very latest live from Bloomberg, Sebastian Salek in London. Good morning, Sebastian.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Every sector is now in the red. The miners lead the losses, though it's worth noting, though, that some of the index's biggest members, Rio Tinto and BHP, are trading ex-dividend. The car sector also very heavily hit. Continental, the tyre maker, plunging to its lowest intraday level since 2013. That's after the company gave an outlook that analysts called cautious and disappointing. More widely, we've heard warnings around the coronavirus from companies like Hugo Boss, the fashion house, and the UK television network ITV. European stocks now down by almost 0.9%. Live in London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Sebastian, thanks. The coronavirus has hammered the oil market. Prices are down more than 20% since the start of the year. That is the backdrop for OPEC's full ministerial meeting taking place today in Vienna. Saudi Arabia and Russia are split over making bigger cuts in oil production. The Saudis want to cut as much as 1.5 million barrels a day. Russia wants to maintain production at current levels. Checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate is down almost 0.3% at $46.65 a barrel. Brent is down 0.3% at $50.96.
And S&P futures are down 50 points this morning. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Global cases from the coronavirus outbreak top 95,500, and the death toll rose to 3,285. The virus is also prompting authorities in Italy to close schools nationwide until March 15th. In the U.S., Vice President Mike Pence announced new screening procedures for some overseas travelers.
All direct flights from all airports in South Korea and Italy are now being subject to multiple screens before passengers board to come to the United States of America.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's planned state visit to Tokyo has been postponed because of the virus. That's according to the Japanese government. And now Switzerland has reported its first coronavirus death. Former Vice President Joe Biden says we can't let the Democratic primary turn into a campaign of negative attacks. Fresh off his Super Tuesday wins, Biden told a crowd in Los Angeles the most important goal for Democrats is defeating President Trump in November.
If we give this man another 4 years in the White House, he'll forever and fundamentally change the character of this nation. We can't let this happen.
Some supporters of Bernie Sanders are turning up the heat on Elizabeth Warren to drop out and endorse her fellow progressive, but Warren's team says the Massachusetts senator is taking time to assess her campaign. Meanwhile, President Trump slammed Senator Warren for siphoning votes away from Bernie Sanders.
She was really a spoiler because other people got out and those votes inured to Joe. And those people really helped Joe, by getting out early.
Trump called Warren selfish. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts delivered a rare rebuke to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. The justices are hearing a key case on abortion rights, a big test for President Trump's picks, Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Roberts accused Schumer of threatening the justices after the senator said this outside the Supreme Court during the hearing.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
Schumer says he was sending a political warning. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's just before 5:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, not a good night for local basketball, pro or college. Knicks, Nets, St. John's, Seton Hall, all lost. We'll start with college. It is March, and two teams ranked in the top 15 gave us a hint of what we'll see next week at the Big East Tournament at the Garden. Villanova and Seton Hall went to the wire.
McKnight's got the basketball, cross half court, 2 seconds to go, driving, kick to the corner, three-pointer up, it is no good! No good! Miles Cale missed from deep in the corner, and Villanova has held on for a 79-77 win.
Westwood won calling the finish as Seton Hall fails to wrap up the Big East regular season title. St. John's was coming off a 20-point upset win over Creighton. The Red Storm lost by 22 at Butler. Northeast Conference has already started its postseason tourney. A 1-point win for LIU, a 1-point loss for St. Francis, and the MAC Iona lost by 1 to Quinnipiac. Manhattan fell at Ryder, but a win for Fordham, just its second of the year in the Atlantic 10. The Rams won at George Washington. As for the Knicks, they got 32 points from Julius Randle, but beaten at the Garden by Utah, 112-104. Blowout at Barclays. No Karis LeVert magic like he had the night before in that big comeback overtime win at Boston. LeVert had 51 in that game. Back to earth with 14 points. Memphis drubbed the Nets by 39. J-Hap continues his sensational spring. 4 more scoreless innings as the Yankees beat the Phillies last night in Tampa. The Mets beat the Marlins. 3 scoreless innings for Marcus Stroman. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
Thank you, John. Wall Street futures are extending their losses this morning, and this red headline crossed the Bloomberg terminal moments ago. Europe's banking sector index is set to enter a bear market. S&P futures lower by 54 points right now. Dow futures down 435 points. NASDAQ futures lower by 159 points. The stock 600 in Europe is down about 1%. 10-year Treasury yield 0.97%. This is Bloomberg.
Vattel Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
I'll read Stan. Will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
The IMF is making available $50 billion to help countries deal with the coronavirus. For more on the economic and market fallout from the epidemic, I want to get to David Kotak, Chairman and Chief Investment Officer of Cumberland Advisors, who joins us now from Sarasota, Florida. So, David, every day is a different story. Obviously, we're getting more deaths, more bad news from around the world. We've got the Biden surprise upset here in the United States. We've got the rate cut. Where is this leading you on strategy?
Well, we have focused on this high volatility, Emily, 1,000 up, 1,000 down, 1,000 up, 1,000 down. It's extraordinary volatility. We're going to see more of it, we believe. We are sector conscious, so we don't have any exposure in transportation. You just had a discussion on airlines. We are worried about hospitality, cruise ships, and we're worried about some aspects in the credit markets. We're starting to see spreads widen, so we have to be careful about that. We are overweight the U.S. healthcare sector. The U.S. healthcare sector should be owned in the face of the market volatility because it has such a positive outlook for the sector.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks turn lower in Europe and rose in Asia as investors assess government efforts to confront the coronavirus. U.S. stock index futures, they're giving back a chunk of yesterday's surge, while treasuries are rising. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 57 points, Dow futures down 457, and NASDAQ futures down 163. The DAX in Germany's down 1.3%. 10-year Treasury up 23/30 seconds, yield 0.97%. Yield on the 2-year 0.62%. NYMEX crude oil's down 0.6% or 27 cents at $46.51 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $4.50 at $16.4760 an ounce. The euro 1.1169 against the dollar. British pound 1.2930, and the yen at 106.86. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very
very much, Karen. The U.S. death toll from the coronavirus has risen to 11. California officials northwest of Sacramento say an elderly man who tested positive for COVID-19 after returning from a San Francisco to Mexico cruise has died. Japan says Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit in April has been postponed due to the virus, and Switzerland has reported its first death from the coronavirus. Chief Justice John Roberts is criticizing as inappropriate and dangerous comments Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer made about Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Schumer, speaking outside the Supreme Court about a key abortion case, told the justices, "You won't know what hit you if you go forward with your awful decisions." In the NBA, the Nets and Knicks lost, the Celtics won, the Warriors lost. In the NHL, the Capitals won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's bring in Julian Lafargue. He's head equity strategist at Barclays Bank as we continue to watch European indices and U.S. futures extend their losses this morning. What do you see driving the heightened volatility in this market right now, Julian?
Hi, good morning. Well, I think it's clear that the market is currently trying to decide as to whether this epidemic or pandemic is something that could bring potentially the world into some sort of recession, or if central bank support and government support will be enough to help us go through a tough phase, but where we're going to emerge probably in the second half of this year as stronger. And because it's almost impossible to say or to have any degree of high conviction around this topic right now, the market remains extremely volatile. And we do expect that to continue for a while until at least we do get a sense that the epidemic is under control.
And we certainly saw that volatility play out earlier this week when the Fed delivered that emergency 0.5 percentage point rate cut. Are you looking for more easing from the Fed when it meets again in a couple weeks?
It does look like the odds are in favor of further cut. Not too sure if they're going to use the next meeting. I guess it will really depend on the data we have, not necessarily the macro data in terms of job or things like that, but much more the data in terms of how the virus is spreading around. They may want to wait another month, but clearly the likelihood of the next move being a cut rather than nothing is very high right now.
What indicators are you looking at to game out the direction of this market?
Well, as I said, I think you cannot really trust the economic data you're getting right now, looking at things like the ISM or the PMIs, just because they don't necessarily reflect the reality. If you look at the Chinese data, it was very poor, but expected to rebound. In the developed world, the data is still strong, but likely to weaken substantially in the coming months. Unfortunately, I guess like many investors, what we're looking at are things like the number of cases, whether the mortality rate is increasing or decreasing, and then sort of high frequency indicator that's more on the China side, looking at pollution level, traffic levels, things like that. And then it's really about listening to companies to see what they see on the ground real time.
We've heard from a number of companies already lowering their outlook forecasts for much of the rest of this year. What's your sense of the messaging that they're putting out in terms of how this outbreak could affect their bottom lines?
Well, companies tend to let's say, plan for the worst and hope for the best. So we're not too surprised to see earnings downgrades. It's better for them to be cautious, and hopefully they have a positive surprise and they get to beat in a quarter or two. The message, I would say, has been better than expected, just because expectations were so low. So of course you're going to see impact. Of course you're going to see downgrades. But a good proportion of companies have said that this could last maybe half for the first half of the year. We're rebounding in the second half, so some companies have kept their full year guidance unchanged. We haven't seen any massive negative surprise. I think obviously tourism, airlines are the most impacted, but other part of the market seems to be holding up pretty well.
Yeah, and as we continue to watch the broader indices fall, we've seen a bounce back in the last few days in emerging markets. Is that something you're getting into?
Yeah, that's something we've been positive for a while. That was before the coronavirus, and we're still positive. You have to take a sort of medium-term view on that part of the market. But if you look at what's going on even on the shorter term, China appears to be emerging from the epidemic. We're starting to see positive signs out there, and when you look at from a valuation and growth perspective, that's always a very interesting market. We have a preference for Asia over Latin America when it comes to emerging markets. But with a dollar that has finally started to weaken a bit, that's another tailwind. Oil prices lower, that's another tailwind. So the outlook, maybe not in the next 2-3 months, but medium term feels pretty good for the emerging market complex.
Thanks for this, Julian. Good talking with you this morning. Julian Lafargue is head equity strategist at Barclays Bank. Just to keep you updated on where the markets are headed, they are extending losses, particularly in Europe and for U.S. futures. S&P futures are lower by 61 points now. That's almost 2% lower on the session. Dow futures down 483 points. NASDAQ futures lower by 173 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It's been a wild week of ups and downs on Wall Street. We had a sharp gain on Monday, followed by a nosedive on Tuesday, and another big jump higher yesterday. But this morning, it looks like another downturn, with futures falling before the opening bell. Carnival's Princess Cruises has diverted a ship bound for Ensenada, Mexico, after a 71-year-old passenger who'd recently traveled on the ship died of coronavirus, becoming California's first such fatality. The ship was to be held off the California coast while state officials tested passengers and crew. Facebook has closed its Seattle office and encouraged employees there to work from home for now after one of the company's Seattle contract workers was diagnosed with the coronavirus. It's the first known infection within the company as the virus spreads in the region. And first they waived change fees. Now both United Airlines and JetBlue are reducing their domestic flight schedules as they deal with the drop in travel demand because of the coronavirus outbreak. United has also cut its international flights and is imposing a temporary hiring freeze. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs. or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres. Ends 18th of March.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge, wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches...
Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Incredible. This piece is my favourite. Stunning. I can't look away.
Who's the artist?
It's clearly a Costa.
Oh, look, there's the artist now. What do you call this masterpiece?
We call it our velvety smooth flat white.
Crafted with the world's best beans and finished with a floret hand-drawn by expert baristas, the flat white at Costa Coffee really is a work of art. Visit the nation's favourite coffee shop and enjoy one today. The question, what is your favourite branded coffee shop, was asked. See costa.co.uk for full details.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak, brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com.
And we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are falling this morning following yesterday's big rally on Wall Street. And Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us with the latest. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. Yeah, S&P futures right now down 2% after yesterday's 4% surge in the S&P 500. One thing is abundantly clear. Volatility reigns. Risk assets are still whipsawing, with traders remaining on edge amid a rise in virus cases around the world and as many governments extend quarantines and travel restrictions. The S&P 500, in fact, has rallied about 6% this week, a rebound that began late Friday when the Federal Reserve pledged action. Again, it's down this morning, and it's still 7.5% below last month's all-time high. Meantime, the House of Representatives has approved a $7.8 billion spending package, and also California declared a state of emergency. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. As coronavirus cases in the U.S. rise, the outbreak appears to have stabilized in South Korea. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong on the outbreak's key developments.
The infections in Asia appear to have peaked as they gain pace in the West. South Korea is testing 10,000 people a day and maintains a mortality rate of just 0.5%. California's emergency makes more resources available. The state had its first death on Wednesday. Elsewhere in Europe, Italy says it'll close schools until March 15th as its deaths jump by 28. And finally, Hong Kong confirms the first human-to-animal transmission, but it's not believed that pets can themselves infect humans. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Brian, thank you. The coronavirus will be a major topic at OPEC's full ministerial meeting, which takes place in Vienna today. Saudi Arabia and Russia are split over making bigger cuts in oil production. Checking oil right now, NYMEX crude oil is down almost 0.8%. It's at $46.43 a barrel. Brent is down about the same at $50.75.
And the biggest domestic airline in the UK has collapsed. Flybe has entered administration, and most of its more than 2,000 workers will be dismissed. Talks on a government government bailout for Flybe failed, plus pressure from the coronavirus outbreak gave the airline no breathing room.
And S&P futures down 59 points this morning. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:33 on Wall Street. Let's check on what's happening around the world. Here's Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Global cases from the coronavirus outbreak topped 95,500, and the death toll rose to 3,285. That includes the first death in Switzerland from the virus. In the U.S., Vice President Mike Pence announced new screening procedures for some overseas travelers. Pence says all direct flights from all airports in South Korea and Italy are now being subject to multiple screens before passengers board to come to the U.S. Pence also says all state and university clinics can now test for the virus.
Our objective ultimately, and as quickly as possible, is to have tests made through these commercial laboratories and commercial providers that your local doctor, your CVS, your MedCheck is able to have a coronavirus test.
Meanwhile, the Japanese government says Chinese President Xi Jinping's much-anticipated state visit to Tokyo has been postponed because of the virus. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden is pledging to unify Americans as he prepares for a potentially long primary fight against rival Bernie Sanders. Sanders, during a news conference in Burlington, Vermont, was asked about what they're doing, and he says, together, it's an unprecedented movement, and it's threatening the country's conventional political machine.
That is an establishment which is working frantically to try to defeat us. And there's not been a campaign, I think, that has been having to deal with the kind of venom we're seeing from some in the corporate media.
Meanwhile, some supporters of Sanders are turning up the heat on Elizabeth Warren to drop out and endorse her fellow progressive. Chief Justice John Roberts criticized comments made by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer as inappropriate and dangerous about Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Roberts was responding to Schumer's remarks at a rally outside the court while a high-profile abortion case was being argued inside, saying, "You will not know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions." Longtime Democratic Texas State Representative Harold Dutton has found himself in a surprise election battle against Houston City Council member Jerry Davis after a mysterious third candidate received 21% of the vote, triggering a runoff. The problem is, no one seems to have met or even seen third-place finisher Natasha Ruiz. Dutton says he became suspicious of the outcome when he realized he had never had any interaction with the candidate.
We've never seen them. We've never talked to them. They never showed up. They never had a sign. They don't seem to be a real person.
Dutton says he's considering legal action. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. 5:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update with John Stashauer.
Nathan, 24 hours after an amazing win in Boston, they came from 21 down, won in overtime. Karis LeVert scored 51. The Nets were back in Brooklyn, and they fell back to earth. The Memphis Grizzlies, a sub-500 team coming in, won 118-79. LeVert this time scored only 14, and Spencer Dinwiddie, who averages 21 a game, held to 4. He shot 1 for 9. Nets coach Kenny Atkinson.
These are the moments where you really, you have to embrace the adversity. And we're obviously disappointed and frustrated that we couldn't build off a great win. And, we're definitely frustrated with that.
Knicks were riding a modest 2-game winning streak. They lost at the Garden to Utah, 112-104. Julius Randle had 32 in defeat. Milwaukee still has not had back-to-back losses all year. The Bucks beat Indiana. Dallas stopped New Orleans in overtime for Luka Doncic, 30 points, 17 rebounds, 10 assists. College hoops, good one in the Big East. Seton Hall had a chance to clinch the regular season title. Villanova prevented it, winning 79-77. St. John's lost at Butler, 77-55. Rare win for Fordham, losses for Manhattan and Iona. LIU won by a point to advance to the Northeast Conference tourney. The season over for St. Francis, losing by 1 to Robert Morris. Tom Brady asked about possibly leaving New England.
I know it's been a lot of patience for me, and obviously being where I've been for 20 years, it's been an amazing experience, and I don't know what the future holds right now. I'm just trying to be patient through this process. My first time going through it. And in the meantime, I'm going to spend a lot of time with my family over the next 10, 12 days. And we got a little vacation plan, which I'm looking forward to.
About to become a free agent, Brady did an Instagram chat with UFC President Dana White. Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
John, thanks. It's coming up to 5:38 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on how Reddit users are shaking up the stock market. Luke Kawa wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
I could see a case for regulators maybe getting involved. I could see a case for regulators thinking this is too small ball to really get into. And, the activity does appear to have been relatively coordinated.
Read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can get a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio. Watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device at youtube.com. Search Bloomberg Global News. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report. Good morning, Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Morning, Nathan. New York City officials this week halted a court order to stop construction and demolish much of a 55-story condo tower in Manhattan. The ruling was announced last month. It said the developer of the project, known as 200 Amsterdam, had to shrink the building because it violated the city's zoning code. Well, in mid-January, some New Jersey lawmakers quietly reintroduced bills that could authorize casinos in the northern part of the state. They say they have no plan right now to advance the measures, but they want to be ready just in case the improving Atlantic City casino market takes a turn for the worst. Yale and Stanford, along with Dartmouth College, are among schools that have curtailed international travel for their graduate business programs. This as the coronavirus continues to spread. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
Thanks, Ed. 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio's on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Steve Potusk, and on 1010 Wins in New York, we're talking about Abercrombie keeping its Fifth Avenue flagship store open one more year.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on WHAS in Louisville. Toyota's recalling 3.2 million cars to fix faulty fuel pumps.
I'm Roger Hearing on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the collapse of the regional airline Flybe.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting General Motors plans to roll out an electric vehicle for every one of its brands beginning this year.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. A morning pointing to losses on Wall Street as equities fall in Europe. S&P futures are down 60 points. Dow futures down 464 points. NASDAQ futures lower by 166 points. And you are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is your... If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today. This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's all new bottles are made from 100% recycled plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still 100% recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres, ends 18th of March.
And the quarterly figures are looking great.
No, don't, please. Struggling to get through that pre-lunch meeting? That deserves your favourite food delivered. Like Santa Maria Pizzeria, Sir Geister Bros, or German Doner Kebab. With delivery you can track right to your door in London. That deserves Deliveroo. Download the app today. Geographical restrictions apply, subject to terms and conditions.
On air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Wash your hands with either a disinfectant or with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. And let me say again, as we've said before, there's no need for Americans to buy masks.
Vice President Mike Pence says Americans' risk of contracting coronavirus remains low. 159 cases confirmed, 11 have died in the U.S. from the virus. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy says the Trump administration is blurring the facts.
The threat is growing, and the fact that the president can't get his facts straight, blaming the Obama administration with claims that seem to come out of thin air, suggestions that a vaccine is just around the corner when we all know that a vaccine is not going to arrive for another year and a half. That really makes it difficult for people to do their job.
Congressional leaders agreed on an $8.3 billion bill to battle coronavirus. On Wall Street Thursday, the Dow soared more than 1,100 points, or 4.5%. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
Is that good for American finance?
What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are giving back a chunk of yesterday's surge. Treasuries are rising, stocks in Europe turned lower, and shares rose in Asia. This all as investors assess government efforts to confront the coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 55 points, Dow futures down 431, and NASDAQ futures are down 157 or 1.8%. The DAX in Germany is down 1.2%. 10-year Treasury up 24/30 seconds, yield 0.97%. The yield on the 2-year 0.62%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.5% or 22 cents at $46.55 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.2% or $2.80 at $16.45.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1167 against the dollar. The British pound 1.2919 and the yen at 106.92. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the U.S. death toll from the coronavirus has risen to 11, with the victims succumbing in California, the first reported fatality outside Washington state. Meanwhile, Switzerland has reported its first death from the virus that has claimed 3,285 people around the world. A search continues for survivors of deadly tornadoes in Tennessee, where 24 people were killed and others remain missing. Chief Justice John Roberts is criticizing his inappropriate and dangerous comments Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer made about Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh during an abortion rally outside the court. In the NBA, the Nets and Knicks lost. The Celtics won, the Warriors lost. In the NHL, the Capitals lost. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it is 5:49 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm John Tucker. The spread of coronavirus denting demand for oil. The OPEC cartel trying to fight back. Joining us live this morning in the studio, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern with more. Well, first of all, let's gauge just how desperate the oil producers are right now.
I think it depends who you ask. So I was in Riyadh a few weeks ago, and we've just been hearing constantly from Saudi Arabia that they wanted to even bring this meeting forward. They wanted to act urgently in the wake of the coronavirus. And behind closed doors, His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz says, the event I was at Riyadh compared the impact to a house on fire. He said, you can use a garden hose or you can call the fire brigade. Maybe you'll mess up some furniture, but you'll still have your house. They want to make a big move. And right now what we're hearing on the ground.
What's a fire hose
right, exactly.
add up to in terms of production cuts?
So earlier in February, the technical committee said about 600,000 barrels a day they thought they would need to cut. But Saudi Arabia is saying that they would like to go for maybe 1.5 million barrels a day. But on the other side, Moscow is more willing to just roll over the current production cuts they're already doing. They're not as desperate. They've been taking this wait-and-see approach, and that's the split we're seeing right now in Vienna between the two, Moscow and Riyadh. But I would like to say, I've covered OPEC a number of times. This is a dance they do a lot. We always see this. Russia, pulls back, wait and see, and then at the end of the day, Saudi's able to bring them on board. So the question is this just smoke and mirrors, theatrics for the market for a surprise, or is there a real rift right now?
Okay, Saudi Arabia, number one producer. We're very first Russia. They're number two at this point?
So in break even in terms of prices, Saudi Arabia needs, the IMF has $84 a barrel to their budget. And all this you hear about Vision 2030 with the Crown Prince and they're diversifying, they're still heavily reliant on oil, which is why they want a production cut, because they need to prop up prices. Russia, though, Putin can balance his books about $40 a barrel. Huge price differential between these two partners.
OPEC Plus and OPEC. OPEC's meeting today, OPEC Plus, which includes Russia. That's tomorrow. What happens then?
Well, today they need to get all of OPEC on board, and then they need to go to Russia and say, are you willing to get on board with this agreement? Now, again, there is this rift developing. President Putin and Alexander Novak took a very much wait-and-see approach to how they're going to respond. We hear that they're willing to just roll over, but it is in Russia's benefit politically to maintain part of this group. Because everyone always asks me, do you think this group will collapse? But it's given President Putin a lot of clout in the Middle East. It's given them a lot of leverage, and they are the winners of this agreement. They don't cut nearly as much as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia bears the burden of all these cuts, and they still get the political capacity to be a part of this group. And it's very good for President Putin.
Okay, even if they do agree to a cut, there's always the question of cheating by other members. How does that go?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of cheating last year. His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz was really starting to clamp down. I've never been in a meeting until last year when he started to name names out loud.
Clamp down how?
Well, one thing was a little bit embarrassing. He brought all the cheaters out to the press conference. They've never done that before. So they are naming names. The biggest cheaters would be the likes of Nigeria and Iraq, and to a lesser extent as well, Russia.
And don't count out non-member, the United States of America.
Right, exactly. So the big question is, one of the big questions is OPEC even continue doing this? They're losing market share just to give it up to the U.S. And yesterday we had that data showing that American the shale producers production surged to a record. So OPEC is just losing market share to U.S. shale. The more they cut, they just open up the other door. It's not just U.S. shale as well. Guyana's producing, Norway, Brazil. There are other producers outside of the group that are just gaining market shares. OPEC continues to deteriorate their share of the market.
Okay, as prices decline, though, specific to U.S. shale producers, we're seeing some cracks develop because they need a certain break-even price, right?
Yeah, the U.S. shale producers definitely need a higher price than you would need in the Middle East. If the last barrel of oil ever gets produced in the world, it will come from Saudi Arabia. But the thing is, if OPEC cuts, we're going to likely see a price bump. But obviously, it depends how big the cut is. The market's pricing in already at least 600,000, probably 1 million already. But that would certainly help U.S. shale.
Thanks for stopping by. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. And as we check prices right now, Brent is at 50.87, down 26. NYMEX down 28 at 46.51. I'm John Tucker. Karen, back to you.
John, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Accounting firms are urging staffers to limit travel as a precaution. Accountants want to be sure they can continue working with clients during the coronavirus crisis. A federal judge ruled that International Paper did not violate the law when it fired a machine operator in New Jersey for taking medical leave to travel to Texas to attend a professional football game. And a lawsuit filed in Nevada federal court accuses Aria Casino and Resort of operating an illegal tip pool that withheld more than $650,000 in tips from at least 40 workers.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. The Supreme Court heard arguments this week on a legal tool the Securities and Exchange Commission has used to collect billions of dollars from defendants in court. The justices appeared ready to limit the SEC's use of disgorgement to recoup ill-gotten profits from wrongdoers, a power that is geared toward reimbursing victims. And Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with John Coffey, a professor at Columbia Law School.
Explain the SEC's use of disgorgement.
The issue is whether the SEC can grant disgorgement, and what does disgorgement actually mean? The SEC is empowered by Congress to grant equitable remedies when they find a violation. In this specific case, the SEC found that the two defendants were running something similar to a Ponzi scheme and taking lots of money in. They took in $27 million to build a cancer center, and they walked off with $8 million of the proceeds and built nothing. Should they be liable for all the 27 they took in, or only for the $8 million profit that they made? They did spend money legitimately on trying to construct the center. The parties disagree on what disgorgement means, and the defendants are actually saying there's no authority at all to grant disgorgement. It's pretty likely, based on the argument that we heard, that the court may want to limit what disgorgement means and may want to require that disgorgement applies only to funds that are returned by the SEC to investors. That was what got the most discussion.
What was the basis of their argument that this is an illegal punishment?
The defendants are saying nowhere in the statute does it say the SEC is entitled to grant disgorgement. There is a reference instead in several bills that the SEC can seek equitable remedies for violations of the securities laws. Historically, disgorgement was an equitable remedy, but there's still a question of what it means. It certainly means that you can seek the return of the ill-gotten gain. What was the gain that the defendant received? And you can also interpret the provision to say that money should be returned by the government to the injured victims and not simply placed in the federal treasury. So those are the two issues that the courts seem to be most interested in.
And that's John Coffey, a professor at Columbia Law School, speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news, by listening to the Bloomberg Law Show at 10 p.m. Eastern, or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. And futures are lower this morning. S&P futures are down 63 points. Dow futures down 484. That's down about 1.8%. And NASDAQ futures, they're down 2%, down 175 points. 10-year Treasury up 28.30 seconds, yield 0.96%. The yield on the 2-year, 0.61%. The 30-year yield at 1.61%. And the euro at 1.1169 against the dollar. Bloomberg Daybreak continues, and this is Bloomberg.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
The famous five were at home discussing their next adventure. "Let's visit Tower Bridge," said Dick. "Or Cardiff Castle," added Julian. "St. Michael's Mount," cried Anne. Dick jumped up. "Wherever we're going, we'll need to leave right now." "Relax," said George. "It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pajamas." With faster journeys across our network, adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Terms and conditions apply. Selected routes only.
The big B&Q 20% off bathroom event is now on, with huge savings on a range of toilets, basins, baths and furniture. So you can get a great deal on the style that suits you. But hurry, 20% off ends Monday. You can do it when you B&Q it. Offer ends 9th of March, subject to availability, see DIY.com.
The world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, March 5th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. futures fall after yesterday's 4% rally on Wall Street.
California calls a state of emergency because of the coronavirus.
And the House authorizes nearly $8 billion in spending to combat the deadly outbreak.
A rare rebuke from Chief Justice Roberts to Senator Schumer. Plus, pressure mounts against Elizabeth Warren from Bernie Sanders supporters to drop out of the race. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Knicks and Nets both lost at home, and in the Big East, St. John's lost and Seton Hall fell short to Villanova.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking, technology-driven advisory and accounting firm helping clients be in a position of strength in today's modern business landscape. Visit Witham.com to learn more.
And futures this morning are on the decline. It is 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 62 points. Dow futures down 471, and NASDAQ futures down 166. The DAX in Germany is down 1.25%, and the CAC comparison FTSE 100 down 1.6%. 10-year Treasury up 28.30 seconds, yield 0.96%. Yield on the 2-year 0.61%, and NYMEX crude oil is down 0.4% at $46.58 a barrel. barrel. This data check brought to you by Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers. Savvy investors use Portfolio Analyst to create a consolidated view of their finances and check the health of their complete financial portfolio. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com. Nathan.
Karen, we begin with late-breaking developments here in the U.S. on the coronavirus. Nearly $8 billion in emergency funding to deal with the outbreak has passed in the House. Bloomberg's Bob Moon begins our global team coverage.
The yeas are 415, the nays are 2.
It now heads to the Senate, where swift passage is likely. The president is sure to sign it.
I asked for $2.5 billion. It looks like they're going to give us $8.5 billion. So I think I should say I'll take it.
$3 billion would be dedicated to research and development for medicines and diagnostic tests. Almost $1 billion for medical supplies and preparedness. Vice President Mike Pence pledged that not just federal agencies, but local health officials will get the resources they need. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Bob, thank you. California Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency. On Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more from our 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
The governor says this comes after confirmation of 53 coronavirus cases and a death. He says the state is monitoring 9,400 people in 49 counties for potential exposure.
The proclamation is to serve to help advance our resources, to loosen up our regulatory environment.
He says the state will get $37 million of the federal $8 billion spending package. Meanwhile, a cruise ship that made a San Francisco to Mexico and then Hawaii cruise is being recalled to San Francisco with several of the passengers suffering flu-like symptoms. It arrives today. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And Ed, that news out of California is weighing on U.S. futures this morning. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the latest. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. Yeah, chalk it up to uncertainty. That is reflected in the decline in futures and higher volatility. Well, the S&P 500 has gained or lost at least 2.8% or more in 4 of the 5 past sessions. And look at the point swings in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It closed up over 1,100 points yesterday. The day before that, it closed down 785 points. There are massive competing forces in markets right now. That's according to Alan Lance at lanceglobal.com.
It's a battle of the uncertainty of the coronavirus, versus incredible amount of cash on the sidelines.
In an exclusive interview with Bloomberg, St. Louis Fed President James Bullard defended the recent emergency rate cut.
But the downside risks have increased here, and so we want to take that on board and get some insurance to make sure we can keep the expansion going.
A well-known Dove, yet non-voter on the Fed currently, he said markets are wrong to assume that the central bank is going to cut rates again at the policy meeting in 2 weeks because it's unlikely officials will know much more by then about how the coronavirus is affecting the outlook. The S&P 500 surged up 4% yesterday, but traders are debating whether that was the result of any improving outlook or the result of Super Tuesday. John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, John, that rally on Wall Street yesterday fueled Asian stocks higher for a 4th straight session. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally has the recap from Singapore. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. China's CSI 300 was up 2.2% to hold near mid-January highs, recovering its post-Lunar New Year sell-off amid expectations of more targeted stimulus from Chinese authorities. The ASX 200 was up more than 1% in Sydney to close at 6,395 points, its best gain in a month, as Australia's finance minister said stimulus will come very soon. Japan's Nikkei 225 was up more than 1% to 21,329 points, despite strength in the yen, while in India, shares in Yes Bank were up the most since October, as Bloomberg reported the Indian government has approved a rescue plan for Yes Bank involving a capital injection by a consortium led by the State Bank of India. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Stocks in Europe initially followed Asia higher but have turned lower. Now let's get the very latest live from Bloomberg. Sebastian Salek in London. Good morning, Sebastian.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. We are going down and down. We're down by about 1.3% now on the Stoxx 600. Every sector lower, the miners heaviest hit. But it's worth noting, though, that some of the biggest members, Rio Tinto and BHP, are trading ex-dividend. The car sector hit as well. Tyre maker Continental plunging to its lowest intraday level since 2013. That's after the company gave an outlook that analysts call cautious and disappointing. And we've had plenty of warnings around the coronavirus. The fashion house Hugo Boss and UK television network ITV among those expressing some level of concern. Live in London, I'm Sebastian Sarlik, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Sebastian. The coronavirus has hammered the oil market. Prices are down more than 20% since the start of the year. That's the backdrop for OPEC's full ministerial meeting taking place in Vienna today. Saudi Arabia and Russia are split over whether to make bigger cuts in oil production.
And right now, S&P futures are down 58 points. Dow futures down 446, and NASDAQ futures down 166. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's 6:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has the latest on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy says that a man in his 30s is hospitalized in Bergen County as the state's first positive test for the coronavirus. Global cases from the coronavirus outbreak topped 95,500, and the death toll rose to 3,285. The virus is also prompting authorities in Italy to close schools nationwide until March 15th. Vice President Mike Pence announced new screening procedures for some overseas travelers.
All direct flights from all airports in South Korea and Italy are now being subject to multiple screens before passengers board to come to the United States of America.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's planned state visit to Tokyo has been postponed because of the virus, and now Switzerland has reported its first coronavirus death. Former Vice President Joe Biden says we can't let the Democratic primary turn into a campaign of negative attacks. Fresh off his Super Tuesday wins, Biden told a crowd in Los Angeles the most important goal for Democrats is defeating President Trump in November.
If we give this man another 4 years in the White House, he'll forever and fundamentally change the character of this nation. We can't let this happen.
Some supporters of Bernie Sanders are turning up the heat on Elizabeth Warren to drop out and endorse her fellow progressive, but Warren's team says the Massachusetts senator is taking time to assess her campaign. Meanwhile, President Trump slammed Senator Warren for siphoning votes away from Sanders.
She was really a spoiler because other people got out and those votes inured to Joe. And those people really helped Joe, by getting out early.
Trump called Warren selfish. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts delivered a rare rebuke to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. The justices are hearing a key case on abortion rights, big test for President Trump's picks. Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Roberts accused Schumer of threatening the justices after the senator said this outside the Supreme Court during the hearing.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
Schumer says he was sending a political warning. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. Just before 6:10 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John's Stash Hour.
Nathan, not a good night for local basketball, pro or college. Knicks, Nets, St. John's, Seton Hall, all lost. We'll start with college. It is March, and two teams ranked in the top 15 with a hint of what we'll see next week at the Big East Tournament at the Garden. Villanova and Seton Hall went to the wire.
McKnight's got the basketball, cross half court, 2 seconds to go, driving, kick to the corner, three-pointer up, it is no good! No good! Miles Kale missed from deep in the corner, and Villanova has held on for a 79-77 win.
Westwood won, calling the finish before a record Seton Hall crowd at the Prudential Center. The Pirates failed to wrap up the Big East regular season title. Another chance on Saturday. St. John's was coming off a 20-point upset win over Creighton, where the Red Storm lost by 22 at Butler. Northeast Conference has already started its postseason tourney. A 1-point win for LIU and a 1-point loss for St. Francis. Regular season finales in the MAC. Iona lost by 1. Manhattan fell at Ryder, but a win for Fordham, just its second of the year. The Atlantic 10 as the Rams won at George Washington. As for the Knicks, they got 32 points from Julius Randle, but beaten at the Garden by Utah, 112-104. Blowout at Barclays. The Nets led Memphis after the first quarter and then lost the game by 39. No Karis LeVert magic like he had the night before in that big comeback overtime win at Boston. Jay Happ continues his strong spring. 4 scoreless innings. He's allowed 1 run in 9 innings. Yankees beat the Phillies last night 3-2. The Mets beat the Cardinals 4-1. 3 scoreless for Marcus Stroman. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. Futures continue their declines this morning with S&P futures lower by 55 points. Dow futures down 431 points. NASDAQ futures down 158 points. 10-year is up 25 30-seconds. Yield 0.97%. 2-year yield 0.62%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports.